Welcome back to another FPL deadline stream. This time at Gameweek 14, we have an extremely quick turnaround. And next Tuesday, there'll be another Use Your Fantasy deadline stream for match day 6. And before that, there'll be a best wildcard and limitless squad, probably in separate videos, a team selection, and much more heading into Gameweek 15 over the weekend for Fantasy Premier League. But I'll get straight into your questions as always in this interactive deadline stream. Drop a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hit the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content for both UCL Fantasy and FPL until the end of the season. And let's try to get this stream to over 150 likes and closing on new goals like 38k on YouTube. Easy says, how was your free hit last game? Success or disaster? Somewhere in between. I'd lean more towards success because I was 22 points clear off the safety score and got a significant green arrow. But there were a few disappointments like not going for Cody Gakpo, who was in my team before the deadline locked in, and I switched him to Danny Welbeck. So I lost out on 12 points there, but I also gained them by going for Phil Foden over Jeremy Doku. What if you didn't free it last game? I didn't calculate that. It wouldn't have been that bad. Bruno Fernandes, Dan Burn, Voltemada all would have scored points for me, but yeah, I still think there is a significant difference. I think I gained 20 to 30 points by using the chip. 1.17 million FPL managers triple captain Haaland last game week. Yeah, very disappointing. Man City scored 3 goals, but Foden was the star. And Haaland has been fairly underwhelming in the last couple of game weeks, which is good for FPL, but not for those that triple captain him in Game Week 13. FIFA say that the club that have AFCON players can retain their players until December the 15th. Yes, I'm aware of that, and I don't think it's a big surprise, to be fair. Josh says, hi Dylan. I did my transfers yesterday. Nonetheless, is this a good team? Sanchez, Richards, Timber, Williams, Saka, Minter, and Dye. Fernandes captain, Thiago, Pedro, Haaland. I like the look of it for this week. Rotation is possible, even with Timber and Robert Sanchez. I saw some Crystal Palace fans also debate Chris Richards being benched for Canva. That's another possibility. But assuming that rotation doesn't hit you too hard, it looks decent. But that's with the assumption that all those players start. Nick Pope out for 3 weeks. Yeah, that's also something I talked about in my transfer tips yesterday in a triple upload for Fantasy Premier League. I expected Pope to be out for a couple of weeks. We didn't get the official news at that stage, but yeah, I don't think it surprises me too much. And for those that have Nick Pope, he is a very clear sell. Also, Dylan, I'm so annoyed. I sold Semenyo for Fernandes as I didn't know Caicedo was out for 3 weeks. I just benched him this week. I still have 1 free transfer. Is there any essential or long-term mids? I wouldn't say essential, but Elliot Anderson is looking very solid when it comes to DEFCON, and he's going to get a few bonus points across the course of the season. He won't get much in terms of goals and assists, but neither will Moises Caicedo, especially when he's out for the next 3. But that's also something I talked about in my transfer tips, where Caicedo, after that red card against Arsenal for foul play, he's going to miss 3 matches, and yeah, he's going to be back in Game Week 17 against Newcastle away. But I think Elliot Anderson would stand out at a similar price tag. Cylindra says, hey Dylan, only have 1 free transfer. Is it worth selling Sarr to Anderson, Guimaraes and start Richards and first sub as Mukiele to come on if Richards doesn't start? Yeah, it's not ideal to have any Sunderland player this week, particularly in that defensive line against Liverpool, but I think that's the way I'd go about it. In terms of Anderson or Guimaraes, that's a close one. Anderson is cheaper, but Bruno Guimaraes is a bit of an all-action midfielder. His underlying stats are quite poor, but he always finds a way to give you some points in one way, shape, or form. So I'd lean towards Guimaraes, but that's assuming you've got enough squad depth and also enough money in the bank to make that possible. But yeah, overall, I would do that. Start Chris Richards, of course, but there is a chance he is benched anyway. Or take a -4 to sell both Senesi and Sarr to bench Richards and Mukiele. It depends who you'd be benching Richards for. I mean, who's replacing Senesi in this instance? I mean, that would also be very important, but I'd lean towards the free transfer for now. Like losing my free hit in Game Week 15. I think that's fair enough. Serial Footy says, hey Dylan, start one of Matheus Nunes, Dewsbury Hall or Thiago. Well, Thiago has the toughest fixture, but he's also the best FPL asset of the 3. And he can walk away from any game with a goal because of the penalty duties, but close one. I'd lean towards Thiago still. I think Brentford will score. Hi Dylan, is my starting 11 good? So Raya, Timber, Virgil van Dijk, Gay, Mbumo, Casemiro, Enzo, Semenyo, and Dye, Haaland captain, Voltemada, and on the bench Pickford, Reece James, and Dye, Twansebi. That looks fairly decent, and yeah, Enzo Maresca talked about this the other day, that Reece James will not play against Leeds. It's not a huge surprise either, to be honest, but yeah, with Chelsea, Crystal Palace, Arsenal, expect to see some rotation there. I'd still start in over Casemiro personally, but the Brazilian is fairly decent when it comes to DEFCON. The rest of your starting 11 looks solid, but of course there are some rotation risks, even Timber to a certain extent, and Enzo Fernandez, but I would start in over Casemiro. Mina says, hey Dylan, which of these trios would you prefer to replace Sarr and Senesi, O'Reilly and Anderson, Timber and Minter, Anderson and Foden? I'd go for Timber and Minter. Also, all of the second transfers mentioned in my previous comments is a -4. Do you think it is worth it? I feel it will be a low-scoring week. I have the same opinion, which is why I don't want to use the wild card. I've got 2 free transfers, haven't used any of them yet, which is why Ismaila Sarr is in my starting 11. But even for a -4 hit, I would probably go for it because Sarr is potentially out until after AFCON when it comes to his Crystal Palace duties, and Senesi will miss the next game, and then there are some tough fixtures like Man United and Chelsea on paper. So yeah, I would take the -4 hit. Baraf, good to see you. My team, free transfers -4. Gabriel, O'Reilly, Sarr, Bruno already had Mbumo, João Pedro, Thiago. So Gabriel to O'Reilly and Sarr to Bruno. Yeah, looks good to me. Now, I don't back Man City to keep a clean sheet against Fulham, but they have a tremendous record against Fulham overall. I think it's 17 games without losing against them in the Premier League. Hopefully it comes to an end, but yeah, O'Reilly is a decent FPL asset. Hey Dylan, odds of Tosin starting. I think fairly decent. I'm not going to put a percentage on it, but I would back Tosin at Adebayo to start, and Chelsea should rotate quite heavily. I'm captaining Mbumo, says Baraf. He is second in my Campsy list. You could definitely make a case for Bruno Fernandes instead, but yeah, I think Mbumo is a solid choice. Top 3 players to watch. In FPL terms, in terms of watching in football overall, let me know. But in FPL, I did highlight some of these differentials in my wildcard video and also transfer tips recently, but I think Bruno Guimaraes should be up there. In the midfield, I like Elliot Anderson. Up front, Nick Voltemada and Danny Welbeck, besides the template free of Mateta, Haaland, and also Igor Thiago. Defensively, it's a bit closer, but I still like Palace defenders. I think to replace Senesi, for example, you're looking at Chow. So I'm recommending a lot of Newcastle options, and they've got great fixtures until January, essentially. So I wouldn't mind that so much. Bench 1, Calafiori, Lacroix, Van Dijk, O'Reilly, or play them all. I can see why I want to play them all, but what's the alternative? Which midfielder / forward is going to start over one of these defenders? But on paper, it looks decent. I don't think all of them will keep a clean sheet or return necessarily, but they have a decent chance of doing so. Would you get O'Reilly or Lacroix? Yeah, good question. Probably O'Reilly, and that's with the assumption you can still find a way to get a Palace defender like Daniel Munoz. Good to see you, Harrison James, and hopefully we get the green arrows. Lucas says, hey Dylan, I have no Bruno and only 1 free transfer. Sarr to Bruno and Indai to Dewsbury Hall for a -4 and start both. Or just risk it and 1 week punt on Sarr to Enzo, or long-term Sarr to Anderson, playing free hit in 15. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm just not a massive fan of Indai to Dewsbury Hall, despite the fact that the latter has been better in FPL recently, but I'd probably play... Well, the free in 15 looks pretty good. I'm not sure about your entire setup, but I think that could work. I think Sarr to Anderson is the best solution, because long-term, that could set you up and save you the wild card, let's say. You want to be thinking a bit long-term with your transfers. Now, the kind of counteract to that, or the counter-argument, is because we get 5 free transfers in Gameweek 16 anyway, so you can afford some short-term punts, and that's why Bruno Fernandes would appeal to me. But the fact you need to sell and die to Dewsbury Hall puts me off, and as a result, I'd opt for the longer-term transfer of Elliot Anderson. Bench Van Dijk, O'Reilly, Foden, or Enzo. Jesus. I would probably bench O'Reilly from those 4, but there is a chance that Enzo doesn't play anyway, or at least doesn't start against Leeds. Thank you, Booba. Booba? No, Bobu. Sorry. Hi, Dylan. Good to see you in form as always. Thank you very much, although I wasn't informed reading your name. Sheriff says, your thoughts, mate, on João Pedro. Do we think he starts or start Dewsbury Hall instead? Thanks. Well, I did have João Pedro originally in my predicted lineup, but I think Cole Palmer's going to start and Liam Delap up front. They're going to see my lineups very soon. Sunderland will be affected the most from AFCON. Yes, but the big news for them is that they'll be available for the Tyneside derby against Newcastle. Best Pope replacement? I mean, ideally it'd be Raya, but if you can't have, or you can't fund that sort of move, I would consider Robert Sanchez long term. Then you've got Verbruggen, who rotates very well with Kelleher, for example. I think those would be the standout options between the sticks. Thank you, FPL Kevy. Hey, bro, best of luck. Likewise. Expecting some random rotations from managers to catch us off guard, but oh well. Also, I'm captaining Mbeumo. Yeah, if I had Mbeumo, I'd be very tempted to captain him. Bruno Fernandes is still solid, but I'm a bit less keen on him, especially because from open play, he's not really offering that goal threat. And yeah, rotation is going to be a big factor in midweek and throughout the month of December. Yeah, that'll be later on, Ivans. The same goes for all my graphics like top 10 captains and injury updates and all of that. So yeah, that'll be covered very soon. Dylan, should I do Ndai to Dewsbury Hall so I can upgrade Krupi Jr. to Thiago next week, of course, because of the Arsenal fixture? Assuming that you don't need to start Dewsbury Hall week in, week out, I'd be more open to this sort of move, but otherwise, I'd be a bit cautious about it. But ultimately, would I rather have Dewsbury Hall or Krupi Jr.? Probably Dewsbury Hall because he's going to start most games for Everton. And in the case of Ndai versus Igor Thiago, I know they play in different positions, but they would be competing for that starting spot in your squad. I think Igor Thiago is the superior option. Kyle says, hi Dylan, my current team is a mess. Yeah, I think a lot of us have that situation. I got Pope, Dubravka, Virgil, Munoz, Timber, Burn, Mukiele, Ndai, Saka, Sarr, Caicedo, Mateta, Haaland, Krupi Jr. I have free transfers. What moves would you suggest? Okay, so you're in a good position with free transfers, and whilst goalkeepers is something you want to avoid, and you can focus your efforts in the outfield positions, I think selling Nick Pope could work it actually in this situation. So I like your defense. I don't think you need to change anything there. So really I look at Nick Pope, Ismaila Sarr, and possibly Krupi Jr. Well, you've also got Caicedo to be honest, but I would do something like Nick Pope to either Raya or Robert Sanchez. Caicedo to Elliot Anderson would appeal to me. And to replace Ismaila Sarr, I mean, there is Enzo Fernandez, who I like long-term, but there is a risk of rotation this week, so I'd be a bit cautious about that. Declan Rice looks good, but obviously if you go for Raya in goal, you would have tripled up on Arsenal already. Bruno Guimaraes should be quite interesting, actually, to replace Ismaila Sarr. So I think one of those players to replace the Senegalese winger would be a very good idea. And then for Caicedo, Elliot Anderson would do the trick. Welcome, Beardy, as well. Start Rodon or take it for Timber, says LVB. I have a feeling Brentford will score. Yeah, interesting question. I mean, I don't expect Leeds to keep a clean sheet either. But I think I'd avoid the hit and buy Timber next week because it wouldn't surprise me if Ben White started anyway in midweek. What do you think about my transfers? Senesi, Sajra, Pedro, and Ndai to Van Dijk, Szoboszlai, Bruno, and Guiu. Well, Szoboszlai is a suspension risk. That would be a concern. Mark Guiu is just there to be on your bench, so I understand that. And it funds Van Dijk and Bruno. So overall, I like the moves, but that's assuming you would not be starting Guiu whatsoever. He'd be second or third on your bench all the time. And as much as I like Ndai, he has been quite lackluster recently. Senesi suspended, Sarr's injured, João Pedro could be rotated against Leeds, and I think there are better forwards in the game, like Igor Thiago and Mateta. Even Voltemada would be more appealing over the next two. So, good transfers overall, but be careful about Szoboszlai. He could be suspended very soon. Raya or Donnarumma? Raya. Sarr and Ndai out to Bruno and Anderson/Minter, or Saka and Anderson. Yeah, Minter's a great option as well, by the way, for those that have been asking about replacing Sarr and Caicedo. 6.2 million, massive differential still. I do like Minter, but yeah, a lot of people talking about selling Ndai. I get it. Bruno Fernandes is very popular as well this week. Saka and Anderson also looks enticing, to be fair, but I'm tempted by Bruno and Minter for the time being. You do have Mbeumo already. That could change things a little bit. I know both Mbeumo and Fernandes are good options in their own right, but to have two United midfielders out of the 5 slots, it does leave me a bit uneasy, to be honest. I mean, we saw only last Monday their 1-0 loss at home against Everton, so they're still not a reliable team yet. So in that case, I think Saka and Anderson might just pip it because you've already got Mbumo, and you can always use him as your Bruno Fernandes cash cow in Game Week 16 or 17. Don't want to play a Stev and have 0.0 in the bank. Senesi to Chow looks decent, and I think Newcastle could keep a clean sheet against Tottenham, and long term they've got great fixtures, and Chow scored a brace against Everton over the weekend. Hi mate, would you bring in Foden for Rodgers for free? It's not a luxury, well, it is a luxury transfer. It's not a necessary move per se, but I would consider it. I'd probably lean towards yes. Is Sarr out to Minter or Rice worth a hit, says Genius Gamer? If so, which one? For a hit, I'm not entirely sure. That also depends on your replacement for Sarr this week. That could be a cheap defender, maybe another midfielder in your ranks, but that will ultimately determine whether you should take a -4 or not. But without knowing the context, I would just look at the kind of long-term benefits of bringing these players in, and I think both Minter and Rice are worth the -4 hit in the long run. Start Richards or Thiago? Probably Richards, even though he's more likely to be benched. Igor Thiago had an injury problem towards the end of the game against Burnley, but he should be fine against Arsenal. News from Saliba? Well, Arteta said that he'll be available in the next couple of days. The same goes for another key Arsenal player. I think Trossard, actually. That's the one. So, yeah, Saliba should be back for game week 15 against Aston Villa. But against Brentford, that could come a bit too soon. I think Hincapié and Mosquera will start again. 1904 or 1904 TUK says, hi Dylan, what do you think? Raya, Virgil, Lacroix, Anderson, Estev, Saka, Gakpo, Semenyo, Rice, Mateta, Haaland. Already used the free transfer. Rice for Caicedo. Yeah, looks good. Thiago on the bench. He could walk away from any game with a goal, but I understand why you've done so this week. I would probably go for him over Anderson, though. I mean, Fulham are facing Man City. I just don't see them keeping a clean sheet. Thiago has a higher ceiling. He's got penalty duties, so I would start Thiago over Joachim Anderson. Hi, Dylan. I have Reinders. Still take him up for a hit. 1.8 in the bank. He could still start against Fulham, but he has been a poor FPL asset recently. I know Guardiola gave a quote about him saying that, you know, the way, you know, he breaks into the box and the sort of chances he gets, he's going to get a goal very soon, but I don't think he's really worth inclusion in a 15-man squad for FPL. So, yeah, I would take him out for a hit. I mean, with 1.8 million in the bank, you could go to Minter, Enzo Fernandez, Rice. I think they're all worth it long term, so I'd probably go for yes. Having said that, if you can replace Reinders this week with a decent option, then you could always delay this transfer until Game Week 15 and do it for free, but that's all team dependent. Also, should I take a -4 and transfer Sarr out for Minter? Says 1904. Probably yes. I'm captaining Bruno Fernandes this week, says 00. All the best with that. If I were to change and go against Haaland, Bruno Fernandes is the most likely. Who are you thinking to replace Sarr with? It's between Bruno Guimaraes, Declan Rice, Enzo Fernandez, and a few other options like Minter. Those are the main candidates, but it also depends on my other moves. So, for example, if I did Joao Pedro to Igor Thiago, I could even go from Sarr to Foden. And that's something I discussed in my team selection. So it's between those avenues, I think. Start Rodon or Thiago? Thiago. Is it fine to bench Senesi this week? Well, Senesi suspended, so it is fine to bench him. I'm guessing you know that already, by the way. But yeah, I feel it's better to invest in the midfield. I get that. The midfield has been quite competitive this season. Not many standouts, but they are at a similar level overall. So yeah, I think the answer to that question would be yes. And Senesi can still get DEFCON when he returns. Before I go back to your questions, and remember, I will gift 10 memberships towards the end if we hit our Super Chat goal, so let's be sure to reach that. And it also means that we'll have a longer deadline stream, but I want to show you the FDR and different components of Fantasy Premier League. So Liverpool are top until Game Week 19, with Man United, Newcastle, Arsenal and Man City in the top 5. And if you look near the bottom, we've got the likes of Aston Villa, Sunderland, Spurs, Wolves, and Leeds. Looking at predicted points, Erling Haaland is top with 7.7. Saka, Mbumo, Fernandes, and Amad Diallo complete the top 5, with Mateta, Rice, Salah, Semenyo, and Eze in the top 10. There's also a question of price changes, and I'd highly recommend going to livefpl.net. So in terms of price rises, we could see Minter, Bruno Fernandes, Rice, Chow, and Esteval go up. And in terms of price falls, Okafor, Senesi, Bogle, Pope, Goodmanson, and also, well, yeah, just a budget player. Doesn't really matter, but yeah, not all of these will be accurate, and sometimes you have to wait a while until these changes occur. Mateta is another potential price rise, so as you can see, this is changing as I speak. I'm also going to compare the stats of two of the best captaincy options this week. It's between Bruno Fernandes and Haaland. For my situation, if I don't play the wildcard today, which is unlikely to be honest, I don't like playing it in a week like this where we could get a lot of rotation, but Bruno Fernandes is the front runner to be a sort of differential captain up against the template Erling Haaland, who has 14 goals and 1 assist, an XG stat of 12.64 and 25 big chances. But Bruno definitely leads when it comes to creativity. It's quite similar when it comes to big chance created, but 31 key passes for Bruno looks very enticing. The XA isn't too high at 2.12, and whilst the XG is pretty solid, a lot of it comes down to penalties, and Bruno has missed 2 this season, and that's why he has underperformed when it comes to the goal scoring, with his 30 shots and 9 on target, whilst Haaland has 50 shots overall and 48 inside the box. I also want to show you FPL.team, and this would be 2 free transfers to replace Ismaila Sarr and Joao Pedro. So Foden and Igor Thiago would come in, but it isn't ideal to bring in Thiago up against Arsenal, but long term he would be the solution. Another thing I could consider is buying Danny Welbeck or a different forward like Raul Jimenez, although he is up against Man City. And then I can wildcard shortly afterwards, maybe in Gameweek 15 or 16/17. And then I can bring in Igor Thiago by that stage. But there are a lot of moving parts to that. Of course, we get 5 free transfers in Gameweek 16. So I think some people might be tempted to wildcard around that stage and then still have 5 free transfers after wildcarding, which is a great position to be in. But I think 2 moves would do the trick for me this week, and I would still have something left in the bank. If not, it would be 0.0 million left over with the Igor Thiago move, but that will all be discussed very soon. In terms of the wildcard, I made a few changes to the squad built in yesterday's video, and this includes Bukayo Saka with Mbeumo, but Bruno Fernandes is a very popular option right now, and with good reason. I think Fernandes, Minter, and also a budget option like King could do the trick, but I'm also quite tempted to have a stacked midfield and a lot of squad depth, because throughout December, you're going to get rotation, injuries, and suspensions, so that's where having good options on the bench can be very crucial, and I think that's going to be a big change compared to the beginning of the season as well. With FPL Challenge, and I'll go back to this later on, I've got Raya, Munoz, Mbeumo captain, Enzo, Salah, and Erling Haaland, and this week it is called Value Creators, so double points are awarded for midfielders priced at 7 million or under, and the only player who really classifies for that in my squad is Enzo Fernandez, who might not even start against Leeds away. These are my team selection graphics, which I showed you yesterday, so have a look here and let me know your thoughts in the live chat. The same goes for those watching on the playback in the comments section. Let's continue the discussion on Discord, Twitter, Instagram, etc. But I did fairly well on the free hit. There were just a few gripes of it, like going for Salah, and in the end, Dancer was subbed on automatically. Rodgers blanked, but the double Villa defense did the job, and also the captaincy was quite underwhelming, and Erling Haaland blanked against Leeds, but that probably was a good thing because a lot of people triple captain him. His effective ownership was that high that I would have actually lost out on rank or gone down a little bit if Haaland had hauled, but there were some missed opportunities when it came to Dango Ouattara over Sharda and also Cody Gakpo over Welbeck, who was in my team originally. So a bit frustrating from that perspective, but still 64 points and a significant green arrow into 229,000 in the wild. So there is definitely an improvement for over the last couple of months, that's for sure. And I've got 0.8 million in the bank and 2 free transfers at my disposal. And after you play the free hit, your team reverts back to how it was before you activated the booster, and any transfers you made beforehand will not carry through, because I did do Joao Pedro to Igor Thiago before activating the free hit, and the Brazilian has gone down to 7.4 million, and Ismaila Sarr overnight to 6.6, but the rest is fairly stable to what I discussed in yesterday's team selection. So when it comes to transfer plans, this will be kind of long-term moves. Sanchez de Raya is an option and transfer I'm looking to make on the wildcard, but I think for Gameweek 14, for example, it's not absolutely mandatory. Burn to Munoz is an upgrade, but the Colombian is on 4 yellow cards, 1 more, and he'll be suspended. Ismail Assar is out, and it looks like he could be unavailable for Palace until after the African Cup of Nations, and Mbeumo could be a nice replacement for him, but there are other options to consider. Of course, the Cameroonian is going to AFCON as well, and Igor Thiago is the best replacement for Joao Pedro long-term, but not against Arsenal away this midweek, so that's where the problems lie. And in terms of this provisional team you see on screen, it will be without making any transfer whatsoever, but you saw earlier on, using the website FPL.team, buying Foden for Sarr and Igor Thiago for Joao Pedro, perhaps even Danny Welbeck, could be the best course of action for my FPL setup. And then it comes down to a few key questions like the captaincy. I'm quite sound starting Sanchez, even though he could be benched, but Bruno Fernandes up against Haaland is basically my big debate in Gameweek 14. For those of Mbeumo, I also understand that, and he's ranked higher in my Campsy list, which you're going to see in a couple of minutes' time. And with expected points, Ismail Assar is now down to 1.2, and the rest isn't anything spectacular, but fairly decent, assuming that these players start in Gameweek 14. That is going to be the biggest Achilles heel for this midweek, and just expect to see more rotation throughout December. So now I'll show you my scoreline predictions for the first time this week. Bournemouth 2, Everton 1, Fulham 1, Man City 3, Newcastle 2, Tottenham 0, Arsenal 2, Brentford 1, Brighton 2, Aston Villa 2, Burnley 0, Crystal Palace 2, Wolves 1, Nottingham Forest 1, Leeds 0, Chelsea 2, Liverpool 2, Sunderland 0, and Man United 3, West Ham 1. So next up is going to be the highlighted team weakness and also the heat map. So West Ham are going to be targeted yet again. They are bottom of the clean sheet odds, and I think the likes of Bryan Mbeumo could capitalise. He has been out of form recently, but I would back him to get a decent return against the Hammers this week, and he's a great option on the Thursday. So Arsenal are top of the clean sheet probabilities with a 54% chance. Liverpool are second. Crystal Palace, Man United, Chelsea and Man City complete the top 6, and West Ham are bottom with only an 11% probability of keeping a clean sheet. And last but not least are the top 10 captaincy options for the upcoming deadline, and in 10th place I've got Daniel Munoz, but a lot of these players are rotation risks. That includes Joao Pedro, Voltemada, maybe not so much to be fair, but I'm looking at even Saka. I would not be surprised if he was benched. The same goes for Mateta and Phil Foden, but 2 of them are in the top 5. Fernandes is 4th, Mbeumo 2nd, and Erling Haaland is top once again. But we have seen in the last couple of weeks that there are opportunities to go against him for the captaincy, so that could be something worth entertaining. So before I go back to your questions, let's go through the predicted lineups. With Arsenal, I've gone for David Raya in goal. I'm quite torn about the right back. It could still be Jurrien Timber, but eventually he will be rested, and the most likely sort of game for that would be Club Brugge in the Champions League next week. Mosquera and Hincapié at centre-back, and Calafiori is on 4 yellow cards, so to protect him for the Aston Villa game, I think Arsenal will start Lewis Skelly at left-back. Norgard, Odegaard and Rice is the likely midfield trio, but Zubimendi could also start and get his rest in the Champions League instead, where he is a suspension risk. If he gets booked against Club Brugge, he will miss the Inter Milan game, so I think there's also a lot of long-term planning coming into play now when it comes to these fixtures. Saka, Madueke on the wings, and Victor Gyökeres could start up front for the Gunners. And with Aston Villa, I've gone for Emi Martinez, Cash, Konsa, Pau Torres and Maatsen, Kamara and Tielemans, Guesan and McGinn, Rodgers and Ollie Watkins in their starting 11. Moving on to Bournemouth, Marcus Senesi is suspended, so Petrovic should be in goal with Jimenez, Diakite and Milosevic, with Truffer, Scott, Adams, Adley, Semenyo, Tavernier and Krupi Jr. Another player who is suspended for the Cherries is actually Brooks, so he's not going to play. Cliver is also another possibility. He could enter the starting 11. The same goes for Evanesson as well. We're now on to Brentford, and I think Adje will start left back, but that is one of the biggest conundrums every single week between him and Hickey. Kelleher, Coyote, Collins, Vandenberg, Henderson, Yarmulke, Dango, Damsgaard, Schade and Igor Thiago should start against Arsenal. Moving on to Brighton with Verbruggen, Vifa, Van Heck, Dunk, Kadioglu, Beleba, Ayari, Minter, De Kuiper, Gomez and Welbeck. Jorginho Rutter is doubtful due to injury. With Burnley, they could go for a 4-2-3-1. Dubravka, Walker, Tuanzebe, Esteve, Hartman, Cullen, Florentina Luis, Chiwana and Anthony, Ogochukwu and Fleming, but don't be surprised to see Bryn Larson start on the right-hand side. And with Chelsea, Sanchez, Gusto, Chalobah, Tosin Adarabioyo, who was talked about earlier, Cucurella, Enzo Fernandez and Andre Santos, Pedro Neto and Garnacho, and based on Enzo Maresca's comments, I think Cole Palmer could start against Leeds, with Delap up front completing this Chelsea starting 11. And Crystal Palace are up next with Henderson, Richards, but we could see rotation in one or two positions here. Lacroix, Gay, Munoz and Mitchell, Wharton, Kamada, Nketiah, Yeremy Pino and Mateta. So don't be surprised to see 2 or 3 modifications from Oliver Glasner. And with Everton, I've gotten a decent number of predictions right for them, with Pickford, O'Brien, Tarkowski, Keane, Mikalenko. Dewsbury Hall could play deeper alongside Garner, and that allows Alcaraz, Ndai and Grealish to be just behind Beto, who would lead the line. Another team that deploys a 4-2-3-1 formation is Fulham, with Leno, Tete, Anderson, Bassi, Sessegnon, Sandenberg and Lukic, who is back from suspension. That was the case against Tottenham as well. Iwobi and Kevin on the wings, and Josh King just behind Raul Jimenez. Leeds United could shift to a back 5 again, as they did against Man City, with Perry in goal, Bogle, Rodon, Strout, Goodmanson, Ampadu, Gruev and Tanaka, Aronson, Okafor and the Mecha, but there could be further changes here from Daniel Farke. The same goes for Liverpool under Arne Slot, with Alisson, Gomez, Kanate, Van Dijk, Robertson, Gravenberch, McAllister. I think Salah will start, and we could see Wirtz on the left over Cody Gakpo, and Szoboszlai would be just behind Ekitike. Man City are always difficult to predict, but I think this season they've been a bit more stable in the Premier League, with Donnarumma, Kusanov, Ruben Dias, Cavadio and O'Reilly. We could even see Ake or John Stones start in central defence. Nico Gonzalez, Bernardo Silva, Doku, Cherki, Foden and Erling Haaland. So not many changes to this 11 from the 3-2 win against Leeds. And looking at Man United, Lamens, Yoro, De Ligt, Shaw, Casemiro, Fernandez, Amad Diallo, Dorgu, Imbumo, Mount and Xerxes. Newcastle United could also make a few modifications, like Dan Burn at left back, Livramento on the right, but Ramsdale will start in goal with Nick Pope sidelined for the next couple of weeks. Cher could partner Chow this time round, with Tonali, Bruno Guimaraes and Joelinton, Murphy and Gordon on the wings, and Nick Voltemada up front. We're now approaching the end of the predicted lineup segment, so Nottingham Forest could line up with Sells, Savona, Milenkovic and Murillo, who is yellow flagged, but reports indicate that both him and Gibbs-White should be available to face Wolves. Williams at left back, Yates and Anderson in central midfield, Hutchinson and Hudson-Odoi on the wings, and Igor Jesus up front, but don't be surprised to see Kalimwendo start as well. Looking at Sunderland, Roofs in goal and a back 5 of Hume, Mukiele, Ballard, Alderete and Renildo Mandava, Traore, Xhaka, Siddiqui, Lefay and Brobby to replace Isidore. Tottenham Hotspur have been fairly difficult to predict recently. Vicario, Borro, Romero, Van der Ven and Spence, Paulinho, Bentancur, Kudus, Odegaard, Xavi Simons and Colomwani is the most likely against Newcastle away. And West Ham have another suspension with the same player. Lucas Paqueta just came back and he's now gone again. Areola in goal, Wan-Bissaka and Diouf as the fullbacks, Todibo and Kilman in central defence, Magassa, Potts, Soucek, Bowen, Fernandez and Callum Wilson up front. And last but not least is Wolves. Krejci is doubtful, but I think he could start if he passes the late fitness test. Johnston in goal, Agbadu, Totti Gomez, Chachawa and Wolf at wingbacks, João Gomez and Andre with Arias, Bellegarde and Strand Larsen. So let me know your thoughts in the live chat. Do you agree or disagree with those selections? And we still have plenty of time until the Gameweek 14 deadline, just under 2 hours to lock in our final FPL squads for Gameweek 14. Drop a like as well. With all this coverage, of course, I've answered a lot of questions in the first hour or so of this stream, so let's keep on pushing towards new goals. Let's build the social media platforms as well and get this video to over 150 likes. I'm going to go through member questions first and then answer the rest in order of submission. Thank you, Serhat. I appreciate it. Captain Saka or Ekitike? From those two, it would be Saka. Ekitike is not a bad shout, though, and I think he'll start against Sunderland. No leaks on the Newcastle lineup. Barnes could start, but I think Gordon will get some minutes and Barnes could be safe for the weekend. Tossing up between Mbeumo or Haaland captain. On paper, I kind of back Fulham to get a draw, but hard to go against Haaland when it's a team he scored a hat-trick against before City's record versus Fulham. Yeah, I completely get that, and also with Mbeumo, he hasn't really shown the form recently, just like Erling Haaland, but if you were to back any of them to score a hat-trick this week, it would be the Norwegian robot. But yeah, Fulham could be tough. I know they're quite low down in the Premier League table, but they have underperformed in certain metrics, particularly in terms of expected goals against, where I think they're second in the Premier League, only behind Arsenal. Thanks, leaning towards Sata Anderson as well. Who to bench? Team is Raya, Timber, Van Dijk, O'Reilly, Richards, Mukiele, Saka, Semenyo, Minter, Ndai, Anderson, Haaland captain, Mateta and Thiago. Okay, I would start Raya, Timber, Van Dijk. I mean, yeah, this is the thing. I wouldn't mind benching Timber this week and just starting the other three defenders. Mukiele would be last on the bench, just to make that clear. With your midfield, you could arguably start all of them. But between Ndai and Thiago, I think that would be the last sort of spot in your starting 11. So, yeah, even with Jurriën Timber, for example, if you back an Arsenal clean sheet, then naturally you would gravitate towards that instead. But tough question. I think you've got a good squad for this week, and it should prepare for the squad or for the rotation, let's say. But if I had to pick, I believe I'd go for Ndai. Since technically AFCON players can still play in Gameweek 16, how does the AFCON 5 transfers change the situation? Well, that could make it a little bit more complicated, I guess, in terms of beforehand, we would have thought that by Gameweek 16, most, if not all of these African players would be, headed off to the African Cup of Nations. But now, you've got another week where you've got 5 free transfers, but you've got to decide, which moves you want to make. But ultimately, you can just save it, maybe make 1 transfer and have 5 going into Gameweek 17, and then you can fully deal with the African players who are unavailable for the next month or so. Keep or sell AFCON players during this AFCON transfer. Yeah, like I just mentioned now, patience is also important, and you could just use those 5 moves from Gameweek 17 onwards, and you don't have to use all of them at once. Thoughts on Calafiori starting? Don't have money for Timber. I wouldn't say it's a no-go. Both Timber and Calafiori could start, but I have my doubts. Particularly with Calafiori. I think Lewis Skelly is more likely to start than Ben White in this Arsenal team right now. Timber and 5.6 million mid, or O'Reilly and 6.8 million mid, both -4. Close one, because that can include Enzo Fernandez. Bruno Guimaraes looks good. As for the 5.6 million midfielder, you're looking at Elliot Anderson probably over everybody else. I think long term it would be Timber and Anderson. Own Senesi and Sarr, playing Keane, Richards and Van Dijk. Anderson on the bench. Understandable. I think Anderson should be on the bench against Man City. DEFCON is possible, but I think a few goals could be conceded. Yep, as mentioned before, mate, Raya is my favourite goalkeeper in FPL, even if you've got an Arsenal defender already. Rice, Minter, or a pun on Esteval? I'd take a pun on Esteval. Yeah, potentially. The thing is, I'll be honest with you, in my predicted lineup, I don't have Esteval in there. He should be first choice for Chelsea, but he's not always first choice in the Premier League, let's say. So, Minter's the best long-term, I'd say, in terms of value and the goal contribution potential, but he's only got 1 goal this season in the Premier League. So, tough one to say, but I don't think Esteval starts. So, based on that, I would just lean towards the other 2. Hi, Dylan, what do you think for the long-term is better? Haaland, Thiago and Mateta, or Voltemara instead of Mateta? Long-term, it'd still be Mateta. But then when you look short-term over the next 2, that's where the answer could change a little bit, but it's still very close. I'd pick Mateta overall. I have 4 free transfers, says Louis Gerard. So doing Sarr to Saka and Joao Pedro to Guiu leaves me with 0.9 in the bank to deal with Senesi and Stack. 2 players to play this week for me. Otherwise, I have Rodon. What pair would you do? Okay, so selling Senesi and Stack, 0.9 in the bank. I don't know your other defenders, but I do like the idea of Munoz, who is 6 million. That would require downgrading Stack to a cheaper midfielder. So if you wanted to go like for like, let's say, you could say Chow and Anderson would work fairly well, or Chow and Minter. I do like the look of that duo. How would you rank Rice, Minter, and Anderson? Quite close, to be fair. I think Rice is probably the best overall, but Minter is more exciting when it comes to goal contributions because of the position he plays. From open play, you're going to get more from Minter in terms of constant threat and probably assists. But I think Rice with the set pieces edges it. He's also got DEFCON potential. So probably the way you've ranked them yourself, basically. Rice first, Minter second, Anderson third. On paper, what teams should easily be targeted? Well, Wolves, West Ham, Burnley, Leeds. Those are the top four, or the bottom four teams, the ones you want to target the most. Start Vicario or Dubravka? Probably Dubravka. But then again, I back both teams to lose 2-0, so. Thoughts on Welbeck with upcoming fixtures? I still like him, but he was a big disappointment for me on the free hit. I just think beyond the template free of Mateta, Haaland and Igor Thiago, I'd be looking at Voltemada or Danny Welbeck in that forward line. Thoughts on Paqueta, Sarr out for a -4 and got Anderson and Bruno Fernandes. I like it. Yeah, I do like the look of it. Now, the sort of alternative is to go for Foden or Mbumo, short term, and that gives you enough money to buy Minter instead of Anderson, but I like the players you're going for. Start in Dye or Minter? I'd lean towards Minter. I wanted to get Morgan Gibbs-White, but didn't have enough money, so I got Anderson. I think Anderson offers better value. Louis Gerrard says, for me, I think Dewsbury Hall and O'Reilly are my best. I'm not Sean Connery. Best options. Already have Richards for Palace and can't afford Anderson with O'Reilly. That's fair enough, and Dewsbury Hall has been in great form recently. I'm not going to dispute that, so makes sense. I think that's still a decent duo. Something else you might want to entertain, or at least weigh up, is going for a different defender than O'Reilly, like Chow, and all these defenders I've discussed in my Wildcard and Transtips podcast. Even Matty Cash could be decent long-term, but Villa are near the bottom of the FDR over the next 6 game weeks. Start Gakpo or Rice. I'd go for Gakpo, but I'm not sure if he starts, actually, despite that big return against West Ham. Good morning, or good afternoon, Pieter as well. Hi, all the best this week. Likewise, Musli. Start Mukiele or Gravenberch? I'd go for Gravenberch. Anderson or Minter? Minter overall, but not by much. I like both of them, to be honest. Thank you, Haribo, for the super chat. If you had Salah, would you captain him to try and close the gap to your non-Salah owning mini-league rival? I get it. And when you're behind, you want to find, ways of differentiating yourself, and that gives you the best possible chance. But I'll be honest, with Salah's form, the benching he got against West Ham, he's not even a guaranteed start in Game Week 14. I'm probably going to say no, which is a boring answer. I'm more keen on a Bruno or Mbumo type sort of captaincy, but then again, they are fairly template as well. So I understand what you're saying, but unfortunately with Salah, we haven't seen too much. Best 4.6 defender. I think Van Heck could be considered at 4.4. That's not too shabby. Richards as well, but there is a chance of rotation this week. Yeah, Bruno Guimaraes is solid. He's one of the options I'm considering to replace Ismaila Sarr. Best 7.3 million mid replacement of Sarr. So I've covered this quite a lot. I mean, you mentioned Bruno Guimaraes as well. He's one of the top options I recommend. I like Elliot Anderson, Minter, Declan Rice, Enzo Fernandez. Ndiaye is still decent, but I wouldn't necessarily buy him now. But if I were buying at this moment in time, it's between Bruno Guimaraes and Minter, actually. I think Liverpool will have a hard time to beat Sunderland, especially in the battle of the midfield. Yeah, but because it's at Anfield, I'm still quite confident they'll get the win. Did transfers work out? You've already been going for an hour? I think so, unless I'm exaggerating. Almost an hour. By the time I'm saying this now and replying to your comment, I think it's been almost an hour, let's say. So 40, 50 minutes. What do you think of Bruno captaincy? Yeah, he's in my top 4 for a reason. I do like him as a captaincy option, so I'm quite open to it. And if I were to go against Haaland for the captaincy, I think Bruno Fernandes is where I'd go. Thank you, Ahmad. As always, should we look into Newcastle defenders and even Ramsdale? Yes, I think Dan Burn and Chow are the best overall. Not Ramsdale, though, because Nick Pope will be back by January. Play Dubravka or Petrovic? Probably Petrovic, but he has been poor recently. Thank you, Awali, and good to see you. The same goes to Sontisto. Bench 1, Gavardio, James, Timber, and Burn. Now, some City fans think Gvardiol should be rested, and others think he will be. So, I'll be honest with you. Enzo Maresca said it in his press conference, unless something's changed in the last couple of days. I don't think Reece James will start against Leeds, so he's the one I will drop out. Best Sar replacement, I have Minter, Ndiaye, Saka and Semenyo. I'd consider Bruno Guimaraes in your situation, yeah. I went with Bruno captain. My only issue with that is that United play, so Friday for you, I'm guessing. In the UK, it's on Thursday night. The suspense will be painful, especially if Haaland haws. I get that. But try not to let that affect your decision-making too much. Ultimately, you want to captain the player you think will score the most points. If that's Bruno Fernandes, go for it, even if there might be a nervy day or so in the build-up. Hola, estimado Dylan. ¿Qué opinas de capitanar a Mbeumo o Gakpo? Prefiero a Mbeumo, pero obviamente Gakpo mostró algo muy bueno contra West Ham. Desafortunadamente para mí, porque yo lo tenía en mi free hits y al final lo vendí por Welbeck. Pero creo que Mbeumo es mejor esta semana, aún teniendo a Haaland en el equipo. Sí, creo que Mbeumo puede superar a Haaland en esta jornada, así que no me molesta para nada. From Big Six Club, which club likely to rotate the most? Chelsea. Best 4.5 to replace Senesi. I'm just going to say Van Heck would be up there. I have Joao Pedro. I pray to God he starts or gets solid minutes. I wouldn't count on it. Good to see you, Tustapaki. Everyone good? I'm pumped for the deadline. Yeah? It should be a good one. Hi, Dylan. Please bench one. Semenyo and Ndiaye, Minter, Joao Pedro. Thanks. I mean, Joao Pedro is the most likely to be benched, but it's kind of an awkward one because he's got a good fixture on paper and Chelsea could score 2 or 3 past Leeds even with a rotated side, but it's between Joao Pedro and Ndiaye to bench. I'd certainly start Semenyo and Minter. I'm going to say Ndiaye on the bench. I mean, Joao Pedro is in my top 10 with the sort of hope he starts, but I'm not sure if that'll be the case now. And that top 10 captaincy list was actually made before I saw the Cole Palmer quote, and I think he's going to start with the lap up front. Is it worth taking the hit to get Sar out? If so, for who? Once again, it's team dependent because if you've got a decent option off the bench, that could even be, let's say, Dan Burn. In that situation, I would just not take the hit and wait a little bit longer. Which do you prefer between Anderson and Gibbs-White? Anderson. I think long-term he offers better value. So best Sar replacement is a very popular question today that has been covered quite extensively. So you've already got Saka, Enzo, Semenyo and Cunha. So in that instance, then I would go for either Bruno Guimaraes or Minter. Is it worth a -4 to replace Senesi for defence and play ahead of Rodon, have no bench cover? I think so because long-term this hit could also pay off. So I'm going to lean towards yes. Looking at differential, should I go for Bino, Neto? And if I shouldn't go for them, who? Yeah, Yeremi Pino has shown something in the last couple of weeks and Pedro Neto has been the highest scoring Chelsea midfielder and he could start against Leeds yet again. The fact he can play on both wings gives him a massive advantage and Maresca really trusts him over Gittins and Garnacho, but I think long-term I'd go for Neto from the two, yeah. I have Semenyo, Rice, Mbeumo, Anderson, Minter, Mateta, Haaland and Voltemada. Help me to choose one to bench. It's a very close one this week. Reluctantly, it's between Rice and Anderson to bench. I'd start the rest and I would consider benching Rice. Have so many starting doubts. Joao Pedro, Cunha, Timber with no bench cover. I think most sources would still predict Timber to start. I just think it's a good opportunity for Ben White to get the nod, albeit there is also next week in the Champions League where White could start against Club Brugge and Timber gets his rest there. But yeah, I'd definitely be concerned about Cunha and even Joao Pedro to a certain extent, so I understand that. With no bench cover, I would look to address one of those issues for sure. I think Cunha is the most sellable. Timber is still worth keeping in the long term. Welcome, Alfred. Good to see you. Hi, mate. Thoughts on captaining Semenyo? He is in my top 10 list for the captaincy, and it's a good rank that you're at. It's still early days, you know, in terms of where we are right now. But, yeah, Semenyo is 7th, I believe, and you're going to see my captaincy list one more time before the deadline locks in. But, yeah, I'm not entirely sure based on his recent form. And I know Everton lost 4-1 on Saturday against Newcastle, but Bournemouth haven't been great either. If you had Pope, would you buy Raya? I would buy Raya if possible, yeah. what are your thoughts on free hit Gameweek 15? I can only speak from my behalf. So if we look at my FPL.team sort of setup here, for Gameweek 15, I've got Sanchez away to Bournemouth, Van Dijk away to Leeds, Timber Villa away, Lacroix Fulham away. Then you've got, Semenyo up against, well, I mean, it could be Joao Pedro, but that's a transfer I'm looking to make anyway. This week to either Welbeck or Igor Thiago. I already used the free hit in Gameweek 13, to be honest, but I think for some people it does make sense to use it in 15. There is a relatively high ceiling in a week like that. You can also avoid fixtures like Bournemouth versus Chelsea. But yeah, there are some promising fixtures for a lot of the top teams. I mean, Arsenal will be facing Villa away. That will not be easy whatsoever. But I think for some people it will work out quite well. And I've always said this from the beginning, the free hit is a very team-dependent booster. I've got the wildcard still in my back pocket. I've used every other chip for the first half of the season. And I think Gameweek 15 could be the time where I finally play that coveted wildcard. But I'm also open to saving it for a little while longer. As for the free hit, if I still had it, let's put it this way. It's more likely I'd play it in Gameweek 15 as opposed to Gameweek 14. So going back to my FPL squad, transfers will be made within the next hour, hopefully, but we still have 1.5 hours left overall. Guimaraes or Minter? Difficult, because if you look at this week, I'd rank Minter a little bit higher. He's also a bit cheaper, but I think they're both solid options to say the least. I'm going to say Minter, but very, very close. I had a good free hit, but was not much better than the main team because Salah didn't flipping come on and Van der Ven came on for a huge 0-pointer. Thanks. When you got a huge haul, you stayed on my bench. Yeah, that's typical, right? But I was quite fortunate, I guess, because Danso got Defcon added quite late on. He was on course for 1 point and then got free in the end, so that was helpful. But yeah, I had a few situations like the Salah pick and Welbeck over Gakpo, which prevented it from being an incredible week, but still pretty solid. But I understand your frustrations there. Rodgers, Dewsbury Hall thoughts? I mean, Dewsbury Hall is quite cheap. I would prefer him over King if money is no issue. As for Rodgers, he is a bit frustrating as an FPL asset, quite inconsistent, but a quality player on his day. I wouldn't rank him higher than Rice, Enzo Fernandez, Minter, and Bruno Guimaraes though. Most people don't have many AFCON players anyway, so the Sarr injury makes that even smaller. Yeah, I get that. And even players like Minter, for example, not heading off to AFCON. So Semenyo, the same thing. Kudus as well. Yeah, I think that's very important. I'm absolutely certain we were given the AFCON transfers to deal with selling Salah and spreading the funds. Oversight from FPL Towers. Yeah, but no one expected Salah to drop off this way. But that's probably one of the key reasons why. I do agree with you there. But it does appeal also to the casuals, especially those that kind of go weeks without making a transfer. Or maybe, I mean, in that case, they'll still have 5 free transfers anyway. But I think it does kind of re-engage certain people in a way to just have that extra boost to make the Christmas period so manageable or more manageable compared to previous seasons on paper. Hi, Dylan. Hope you are well. I have 2 free transfers. I want to take out Senesi for Chow, and I can save a transfer going into Gameweek 14. Looks solid. I've gone for 2-0 Newcastle. I mean, a clean sheet wouldn't be that locked in when you look at the clean sheet odds, but Newcastle have a great record against Spurs in recent home matches, and I think Chow is a decent differential, 1.3% ownership, and a long-term acquisition for your FPL squad. I don't think Eddie Nketiah is a good pick, but he should start most games now with Ismail Assar out injured. Bruno Guimaraes or Minter has been covered. I like both of them. A slight preference for Minter this week. Start O'Reilly or Welbeck. Welbeck. James and Stack out, and Anderson and Minter in. Your thoughts? Minter to play this game week, while Anderson for the future Gameweek 16 onwards. Looks solid on paper, and both of them have been highlighted continuously throughout this stream. Mbeumo or Mateta as a captain? Mbeumo. I showed you my list earlier. Mbeumo was second and Mateta was third. Very close. I haven't had a goalkeeper clean sheet in my starting team all season. That's crazy. Sells and Pope were disappointing picks. I can't get to Raya since I've got triple Arsenal. Which goalkeeper do you recommend for the long term? Well, to be honest with you, mate, you've got Sells this week against Wolves. I just start him and avoid the goalkeeper move for now. But if you want more consistent clean sheets, Raya is your best bet. Otherwise, Robert Sanchez could be a decent pickup at 4.8 million. You don't need to have two rotating goalkeepers though. So if you were to go for a Raya/Sanchez, your backup could be Dubravka. And if you are wildcarding soon, that could be one of the changes you make to your squad structure in order to get more funds invested into the outfield positions. But yeah, Nick Pope is out for a couple of weeks. He started the season very well, but he has been disappointing for those that bought him by game week 7 or 8. I think he is worth selling in the long term, but not necessarily this week when you've got sells away to Wolves. Thoughts on Livramento? I bought him this week. I think Byrne and Chow are the best Newcastle defenders, but Livramento is a quality player and he will offer some attacking threat moving forwards. Is Voltemada worth a 1 week punt versus Burnley at home? I'd arguably say he's worth a 2 week punt, which includes Tottenham at home this week, but yeah, taking out Mateta for Voltemada as a 1 week punt, I'm not entirely convinced about that. The kind of argument in favour of it is because you get 5 free transfers in Game Week 16 anyway, which allows you to be aggressive and do things you normally wouldn't do without that extra sort of boost. So from that perspective, it could work out in that sort of short time frame, but I'm not a massive fan of changing from one striker to the next each week, especially if you then go back to the striker you previously sold. Hi mate, thoughts on captaining Semenyo? That's been covered, thank you. Let's see what else we've got. Yeah, just the park. Is that... Did you lose connection or was that YouTube thing? Let me know. I think things are well on my end, but I don't want to jinx it. Start Reece James or Van der Ven? I would say Reece James, but I don't think he starts. So, unfortunately, I think Van der Ven will come on for you anyway, or Reece James will just have 1 point coming off the bench whilst Van der Ven gets you... Well, we'll see what he does. Maybe 1 or 2 points himself. But... I'd probably start Reece James just in case, but Enzo Maresca said that he's not going to play, essentially. So, unless he's lying, yeah, I think it's going to be Gusto at right back. What are your transfer plans here, mate? See, you have a couple of flag players. So, it was talked about in my team selection yesterday in a triple upload, and I showed the graphics today, and also FPL.team. So, with 2 free transfers, I can do Sarr Foden, and to fund that, it's Joao Pedro to Welbeck or Igor Thiago. So long-term Thiago is the preference, but I've got the wildcard in my back pocket, so that allows me to go for someone a bit shorter term, and I prefer Welbeck against Villa as opposed to Thiago against Arsenal away. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. Welbeck and Foden, who are both in my free hit last week. Who to bench, Joao Pedro or Enzo? Enzo is more likely to start, in my opinion, so that's probably what I'd go for. And with my Campsy list, I am probably going to replace Joao Pedro with another Chelsea teammate. So bear with me for a second. I'm going to update that. And yeah, you're going to see the final version. Let's see this. Okay. Start Truffert or O'Reilly? Truffert. Hi Dylan, Mbuma and Savona in for Sarr and O'Reilly. Looks good. I'm more keen on the Mbuma move, even though he's going to be a sell in a couple of weeks' time anyway. Savona's been in good form, but I prefer other defenders, to be fair. Also, if you agree on the transfer, then who to start between O'Reilly and Savona? Slight preference for Savona, but I have gone for both Wolves and Fulham to score. I only have 11 playing players after transferring out Sarr still. Is it worth a -4 to do Senesi for Chow? So that's another question I've covered. And thank you to Coopsy Coop and Twisted Parky for moderating the chat. Mateta captain, he's third in my list. The big concern there is rotation, but if he does start, that looks fairly decent. So let's see if I can get this up. So yeah, I think in 9th place, I'm going to put a new name there for the captaincy list. So you're going to see that very, very soon. So if you haven't done so already, drop a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I've been answering questions for the past hour and showing you a lot of different graphics, talking about team news, suspension risks, injury updates, you name it, top 10 captains, clean sheet odds, and you'll be well prepared now for Game Week 14 and beyond. 2 questions. Should I do a -4 hit to take out Mbuma for Bruno? No. And should I bench Doku or Dewsbury Hall? I'd probably bench Dewsbury Hall. Are we getting the 5 extra transfers after today's deadline or after the next one? It's in Game Week 16, so it's not going to be either. So we've got a deadline today, one on Saturday. It's going to be the one after that. So, yeah, that would be... What would that be? I think the deadline's on the 12th or 13th. I'm going to have to double check that. But, yeah, it's still a few weeks away. Thoughts on Minter versus Anderson? Anderson will give you more defcon. Minter's quite impressive in that regard when it comes to a winger, but yeah, you're signing up Minter for the assists and goal contributions. He's not really scoring much, but I think Elliot Anderson offers great value. I would lean towards Minter though, especially this week. Hi Dylan, would Gabriel to Timber and Ndai to Bruno be worth it for a -4? Yes. There is a slight chance of rotation for Arsenal, and Timber could make way for Ben White, but yeah, I think it is worth it long term. So thanks for the super chat there, Domenico. Saludos, hermano. Torn between Chow, Timber, and Senesi. Done Caicedo to Anderson. Looks good. Gameweek 15, thinking of bringing Thiago and Chow in, or Timber, who don't this week. Well, there's a slight... Look, that's just my opinion anyway. I mean, Timber has been starting every single match since Gameweek 2. Ben White only started the first game against Man United. But yeah, looking at your kind of plans, I still think an Arsenal defender should be the priority long term. But this week, with that sort of rotation risk, it is a bit awkward. I would go for Timber long term. Would you bench Marlon or Richards? Top content, by the way. Thank you very much. I mean, it is a close one. I would start Richards, but there is a chance he doesn't feature anyway. Any essentials for this week? Not necessarily, but maybe a United midfielder would be one of the kind of most appealing assets for Gameweek 14. It's hard to decide whether to start Enzo or Elliot Anderson. Which one would you bench? I'd start Enzo, but he has a bigger rotation risk. Hey Dylan, I'm doing Sarr to Anderson. Should I also do Gabriel to Timber for a -4 as well? Or don't take a hit and play Mukiele and do the move next game for free? I take the hit. It should pay off in the long term anyway. Now, if Timber ended up being benched, then it would be very disappointing, but I still think it's going to pay off. Hi Dylan, start Burn or O'Reilly? I'd lean towards Burn this week. Thank you, Ignacio. ¿Qué opinas de Semenyo y Szoboszlai out por Anderson y Bruno por un -4? Haaland o Bruno capitán. En este momento yo estoy eligiendo Haaland, pero me gusta Bruno Fernández en esta jornada. Con tu primera pregunta, está bien comprar a Anderson y Bruno Fernández. Me gusta mucho. Pero también Semenyo contra Everton está en mis mejores opciones para el capitán. Así que no es fácil, pero creo que yo mantendría a Semenyo y no haría un -4. Me gusta mucho Anderson y Bruno, pero si vender a Semenyo por un -4 no me gusta mucho. Who should I bench from my team? Says RYG. Sanchez, Dubravka, Timber, Munoz, Van Dijk, O'Reilly, Reinildo, Semenyo, Enzo, Ndai, Bruno, Anderson, Thiago, Mateta, Haaland. Okay, so two of them are clear. I'd bench Dubravka and Reinildo Mandava. Then it becomes a bit trickier. Your defensive line looks good, but I would bench one of them, I think. And the most likely is O'Reilly. With your attack, it's probably between Thiago, Ndai, and Anderson to bench. And right now, I will bench, I think, Ndai. Very close one. Hi, Dylan, thoughts on De Ligt? I have Bruno and Mbumo. West Ham and Wolves are fantastic fixtures. Yeah, United are still unconvincing defensively, though. That's what I would say. But De Ligt has been fairly solid this season. I think that's quite clear. Bruno and Mbumo is good for the next couple of weeks, but I'm not a massive fan of 2 out of 5 midfielder slots being occupied by United players, as good as they are individually. But yeah, with De Ligt, I just look at other options like Chow and all these defenders I've discussed. Munoz, Timber, Van Dijk. I think they're all better than De Ligt. Thoughts on Thiago and FPL so far? Well, yeah, he's definitely surpassing expectations and he's offering amazing value. No one expected him to be on 11 goals by December, and he's on penalties. He missed one, but he has scored the vast majority of them and been very consistent, fixture-proof, and one of the best options in Fantasy Premier League overall. Gibbs White or Liverpool midfielder for 1 week punt? Well, Gibbs White has that added motivation of playing against his former club, but I would go for a Liverpool midfielder. Not sure about who from Liverpool. That's the problem. I think Wirtz could start over Gakpo this week, although if you look at it based on form, Gakpo should get the nod based on the last match. Good evening, Dylan. No worries there, Punjabi. Blundered by going for Doku differential instead of Foden. You did really well with the free hit. Yeah, but I'm still thinking of what could have been, right, with Gakpo, who was in my squad, but it is what it is. You can't get them all right, and ultimately the most important thing is a green arrow, but hopefully you can get that in Gameweek 14. Thiago or Casemiro? I would start Thiago. Hi, Dylan. I took a -4 for Anderson and Bruno to get out Paqueta and Sarr. Looks good to me. Not many complaints. Is it worth doing in die for Minter? I think so, because Everton have terrible fixtures, to say the least. Koopsy Koop says, I'm 2k overall, never been this high ever, so I'm hesitant to take a hit. Understandable. It's a great rank to be at, especially at this stage of the season. And yeah, you know, in this sort of position, you can build a very solid foundation for the long term and keep on progressing into an even higher rank. But it will be tough, and there is going to be this sort of psychology that's going to play a big part in terms of wanting to be cautious and not take unnecessary hits. But yeah, sometimes hits can pay off. You just have to pick your moments wisely and try not to be swayed by what other people are doing. Foden, second most transferred in play this game week. Is this a trap transfer? Even if he blanks against Fulham, though, he looks pretty enticing for the next 4 or 5 games. So I don't really see that as a trap transfer, but we can reassess this by the time we get to late December. No worries, Santisto, but I would lean towards yes in terms of Minter. Esteval for Caicedo. I'm not even sure if the Brazilian will start, but he is an exciting option. He obviously scored against Barcelona, played quite poorly against Arsenal, but that game was very stop-start anyway. I'm not so sure. I'd look elsewhere at Minter, Bruno Guimaraes, Rice, Enzo Fernandez, Elliot Anderson, etc. Best 6.3 defender, have Van Dijk, Timber, Rodon, Achimpong. Munoz, but he is 1 yellow card away from suspension, and we could see rotation at Crystal Palace this week. Thank you, Paredes, for the super chat. I own both Senesi and Sarr, 0.6 in the bank and 3 free transfers. Thinking to move in O'Reilly and Rice, but will have to do Joao Pedro to Thiago, or Senesi to O'Reilly and Sarr to, saving 1 free transfer. Thoughts? Yeah, all the options look fairly solid to me, but I'll be honest, I think I'd go for the free transfers. So bring in O'Reilly and Rice and do Joao Pedro to Thiago. Once again, looking at the long term, especially if you have no wild card, that looks like the best course of action for your squad. I'm just wondering who you're selling. Oh yeah, Senesi and Sarr. And it will be Joao Pedro out. I'm just trying to visualize what the rest of your squad would look like, but I think it would be the free transfers for me. Bruno Fernandes or Foden? Bruno Fernandes this week. Hey, who would you start, Rangers or Thiago this week? Thiago. Thank you very much, Awale. As he says, just be patient and your questions will be answered. Hi, Dylan, 1 midfielder and 1 defender, total 13 million budget. Interesting. I would consider Rice and Chow. I mean, even then, you've got money left in the bank, right? Rice and Munoz also looks very solid. You could also change that midfielder to Minter, Bruno Guimaraes. Just depends who you have already. Some of the players I'm recommending might already be in your squad. So thank you as well to Punjabi and also to Paredes for gifting 5 memberships, and Keith has been gifted 1. Definitely deserved, a long-time member of the channel. So also to ELT Singapore, Surreal, a Spurs fan, but enjoy it. A membership there as well. And also to Osman Dida and Andrew Barton, a lot of familiar faces in the live chat. So a big up there to Paredes. He's the one to thank. I'll be gifting 10 memberships myself, especially if we hit our super chat goal. We are very close towards achieving that. And yeah, towards the end, so when the deadline passes, I'll be going through the memberships for an entire month, and we'll see who gets gifted them randomly. Yeah, exactly that. Pieter, big up. Bench 1, Timber, Gay, or O'Reilly. I lean towards O'Reilly on the bench. Is Gameweek 14 bench boost good with 2 Everton players and Chow on the bench while starting Anderson and Richards? It looks good, but bear in mind that some of the players you're starting, like Richards, could be benched himself. But on paper, assuming they all start, that looks very solid. Thank you, O'Reilly, as well. Let's hit 38k subscribers. So that's going to be the aim by the end of the month. And then going into 2026, 40,000 will be the next big objective. Start Gay or Van de Ven? Yeah, Gay for me. Who is better, Chow or Burn? Probably Chow. Should I take a -4 to get Elliot Anderson in for Rangers and start him over Thiago instead? Not for me. Not for a -4 hit. Bench Joao Pedro or Dewsbury Hall? There is a chance Joao Pedro is benched, but if you're backing the Brazilian to start, I would go for him over Dewsbury Hall. Twister Parky says Raya, Timber, Senesi, Munoz, Semenyo, Ndai, Bruno, Saka, Thiago, Haaland, Mateta. Bench Dubravka, Van de Ven, Rodon, King, Chow or Richards, but here could face bench in for Senesi, Captain Bruno, thoughts 4.9 million budget. So you've got a bit of breathing room when it comes to your budget. That's a lot of money in the bank. Captain Bruno is certainly solid. He's 4th in my overall list. Double Arsenal defence is good long term. This week maybe a bit awkward, you could argue. Same with Villa away, but the clean sheet should come again. I agree with your bench as well. So Chow or Richards, I would go for Chow. You've already got Munoz, and I think Newcastle are worth covering defensively with their upcoming fixtures. So that would be my take on your team. King or Guiu, first one on the bench? Probably King. Hey, 1 free transfer, Senesi and Sarr unavailable. Sarr to Saka and play Burn, or Sarr to Minter, Gakpo plus Senesi to Timber for a -4. Okay, so from those scenarios, I would probably go for Saka and Burn, basically. So start Burn and buy Saka. Would you rather do Watkins to Voltemada and play Borro, or do Senesi to another defender? Watkins to Voltemada. Replacement for Senesi, please. 6.5 in the bank. Other defenders are Van Dijk, Lacroix, O'Reilly, Goodmanson. I think Timber's the best option that you don't have already. I like Munoz, but you're also covering Palace defensively with Lacroix anyway. Ellis Coyle says, doesn't matter what rank you are. Right now, 4 game weeks ago, I was 6 million. Now I'm 90k. That's an insane rank rise. You probably free hitted, right? In the last couple of weeks. But yeah, maybe triple captain. I mean, that's a really big comeback, actually, in such a short space of time. I would start David Raya over Donnarumma this week. Louis Gerard says, hi Dylan, have 4 free transfers, doing Joao Pedro plus Sarr to Sak and Guiu. I have covered that before, unless you've added something else to the question. 0.9 in the bank to deal with Senesi and Stack. So, yeah, what combination of defense and midfield? Max cost 10.5. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I said Anderson and, well, yeah, Minter. No, that wouldn't work anyway. Anderson and Chow looks pretty good. And you've got money left over in the bank. I think originally what I said, though, because Chow's 4.9. Yeah, I think you're just short. Yeah. 5.6. So it'd have to be Chow and Anderson. You can't go to Minter. So that would be a solid duo for you. Mateta duo rest. It's possible. Same goes for Munoz, who's a suspension risk. So I think Palace could rotate quite extensively, actually. So I've got a great track record of predicting their 11s this season, but this week will be the toughest so far. Yeah, Thiago this week isn't better overall. That's only if we know for sure that Mateta's benched. But until that happens, I'd still lean towards Mateta. I think off the bench with a short cameo, he could still do the business against Burnley. Start Rice or Gakpo? I'd lean towards Gakpo, but there is a chance neither start. But with Gakpo, you would assume he's going to keep his spot after that big return against West Ham. Will Richard start, or should I try out Senesi for a -4? Well, I'd just start Senesi. Sorry, I'd just start Richards. Yeah, transfer out Senesi for a -4 isn't a bad idea. But that's also assuming you've got another defender who could come in. if necessary. I'm not sure if he will score, Wei saying, but he definitely can. My friend is at 18k overall, his first season playing. I only thought he's ahead of me. It happens, right? Sometimes you get beginner's luck, you could say, but yeah. I mean, you've got to ride the momentum when you're in such a position, and it can easily be lost, but there are ways of obviously maintaining rank, which I always discuss in my videos, but you've got to keep playing the game your way and not be influenced by others. Best replacement for Pope under 5.1, Robert Sanchez. Start Minter or Ndai? Minter. It is a tough game week, yeah. Well, with Sarr, we only got that update from Oliver Glasner a few days ago, and there's a good chance he misses the next couple of games, which also means he's going to be unavailable for Palace for almost 2 months. I've decided to stay safe and captain Haaland. Yeah, look, it's a tough one this week, but I think Mbeumo and Fernandes are quite close, and Mateta, assuming he starts. Start Dubravka or Vicario? Dubravka. As mentioned earlier, mate, with essentials for the week, probably a United midfielder like Fernandes or Mbeumo. Bojan says Mbeumo over Saka and Haaland for captain. Well, Saka is 7th in my list, Haaland's top and Mbeumo second, but I'm quite open to captaining a United player, or midfielder, let's say, over Erling Haaland. Between those two, it's still going to be the Norwegian robot for the captaincy. Best time to bench boost, that's team dependent. I don't even know which players you've got, which makes it impossible for me to say definitively, but you could consider Game Week 17, for example, that sort of period where you get 5 free transfers in Game Week 16. So if you're in a situation where you're quite stacked and you can use those transfers to build your full 50-man squad, then that could also work out quite well. But the kind of bad thing about it is you then want to start taking money out of your bench a little bit, even during the Christmas period, because if you've got too much squad depth, then you're going to have big benching headaches and a lot of points on your bench inevitably. Thank you to Stepaki. Super annoyed though. That guy I'm chasing in my mini league also got Chow. 100 point deficit cut to 84. I'm not giving up. Eye of the Tiger. Yeah, to be honest, I mean, that is quite a big gap, but I've experienced that multiple times in my mini leagues and still won them. So even in December, in January, you know, being 80, 100 points behind, it is still possible to revert it. And by the way, I still won it quite comfortably in the end. So that could still happen with you as well. But you just got to keep at it, play your game, and find those differential opportunities when they arise. But yeah, it's a bit of a shame that he got Chow as well. Hey Dylan, great content as always. On free hit, could you suggest at least 5 essential picks excluding Haaland? So one of them, Mbeumo or Fernandes, maybe even both in a week like this. I mean, I kind of struggle with some of these players like Munoz and Mateta. If they start, they'd be in my free hit, but there is a chance they don't. So that's where there are some doubts in the back of my mind surrounding those options. Even with Chelsea and Arsenal, you can't fully count on their best 11 starting. I think Chelsea are the most likely to rotate quite heavily, to be honest, but Cole Palmer could be a great shout, actually, in terms of an opportunity, because Maresca hinted at him starting the game. He will be subbed off, of course, probably around 60, 70 minutes, but if he can get enough game time, he could certainly make an impact against Leeds. So those are some options to consider for you. It becomes more difficult when you're building, let's say, for example, your ideal goalkeeper for this week. That could even be someone like Sells for you, but I think Wolves could score against Nottingham Forest. So Dam says, my first team right now is Raya, Van der Ven, Timber, Munoz, Reinders, Saka, Semenyo, Mbeumo, Haaland, Joao Pedro, Voltemana. I have wildcard, bench boost, and triple captain. When should I use it? Okay, interesting. Triple captain in Game Week 17 when Haaland faces West Ham. Wildcard would maybe be in Game Week 15. I mean, it's kind of awkward because you've got the 5 free transfers in Game Week 16. So from that perspective, yeah, Game Week 15 wildcard is a bit awkward. Something I would consider is maybe even wildcarding in 16, where you can use your transfers beforehand in 13, or sorry, say 14 and 15. Then you use the wildcard, you have 5 free transfers, and you keep them for later on. And that's where you can triple captain in 17, Haaland against West Ham, and bench boost in 18. I think that could be the best course of action. Hey, do I captain Saka or Haaland? Saka isn't that highly ranked for me. He's 7th in my overall list, there or thereabouts, maybe 8th. But yeah, between those two, it is Haaland, unfortunately. What do you think about doing Pedro, Sarr, and Trippier to Guiu, Fernandes, and Calafiori? I think Calafiori could be benched this week. He's also a suspension risk, one more yellow, and he will miss the next Premier League match. Fernandes is a great move. Guiu is just there as an enabler. I don't really think much of him. Now, could he do well against Leeds off the bench or as a starter? Yes, that is a possibility, but he's not someone you can rely upon in the long term. Captain 1, Haaland, Mateta, Thiago. It's going to be Haaland. Play Dewsbury Hall or Thiago? Thiago. Caicedo to Doku or any other 6.6 or less mids? Let me just get your question up again. So there are a lot of messages here in the chat. So, yeah, 6.6 or below, I'd be looking at Minter, I believe. Hello, Dylan. So and Dieter, Foden or Gakpo? Foden. Minter or Anderson and Chow or Timber for Sarr and Senesi respectively. Money is dependent on the moves. It would be Minter and Timber ideally, but if you're not able to afford that, then it's about compromises, right? But yeah, that would be my ideal sort of replacements. Start 1 in Dial Semenyo. Semenyo. Good luck as well, score pie. Haaland triple captain last week, too hard to take. I'm sure he'll score double or a hat-trick versus Fulham. FPL can be like that sometimes, but yeah, no one expected Haaland to blank against Leeds. He has been in relatively poor form, but I'm sure he'll bounce back soon, and that won't necessarily be comfort to your ears. Start 2 of Minter, Thiago and Semenyo. Minter and Semenyo. Reinders to Anderson or Senesi to O'Reilly. Difficult one, but I think long-term is still Reinders to Anderson. I took your advice about doing FPL content creation, started TikTok 2 weeks ago. Got 2,000 followers, really enjoying it. Well, keep at it, enjoy the process, but you've got to find what you like, you know, whether you like long-form content where you would focus more on YouTube, or if you prefer short-term like you're doing right now. So yeah, just make sure that you keep on enjoying the process and try to improve things and, you know, try to take constructive criticism. You know, I think that's always important. And it's not just from others, but also try to assess your own work and try to improve as much as possible. Felt like an Arsenal clean sheet, says Weiseng. It's possible as well. I think Arsenal could keep one, but I've gone for 2-1 in my prediction. Mina says, and Dias first on my bench. Thoughts? I don't really blame you. Having said that, there is the possibility or the argument to start in Die over one of your defenders, mainly Dan Burn, but I think you've built a solid starting 11 for this week, assuming they all start. Yeah, all good, Duarte. What about you? Sold Caicedo, Sarr, Senesi, bought Anderson, Foden, Keane. Good transfers overall. I mean, Keane is decent for DEFCON. He's got set-piece threat from, well, you can score goals from set pieces, let's say. Foden and Anderson are good midfielders, particularly Anderson for his price. And yeah, you're selling 2 suspended players, 1's injured. Overall, I think that looks pretty good. Start Keane or Burn? Burn. What is the best week for a bench boost? Team dependent. I mean, your bench this week is Dubravka, Joao Pedro, Anderson, Esteve, but what about in future weeks? What would it look like? Which transfers would you make as well? That is all going to influence when you should bench boost, but yeah, Gameweek 18 could work for some people. Now, if you're not triple captaining Haaland in 17, that is another possibility for a lot of managers as well. Is Eze a decent option with the Arsenal home games for a -4? He is a decent option, but there's no guarantee he starts against Brentford. Now, maybe I'm overthinking it, and maybe Arsenal don't rotate as much as I predict, but I think one of Rice, Zubimendi, Eze, maybe even 2 of them, could be rested. Indie to Anderson this week or Indie to Gakpo next week? I just buy Anderson. I'd still forget about Gakpo despite that big return. Senesi to Calafiori or Konate? Well, Calafiori is a suspension risk. Konate's been awful this season, but if Liverpool can lock down defensively, he can get a few 6 to 8 pointers. He's not too bad for DEFCON, but yeah, it just depends on the other moves, for example. So by getting Konate, if you can then get Timber, then I would recommend that. But you've also got Chow and other defenders to consider, so not necessarily set in stone. Would you replace Cunha for a -4? If so, for who? 7.9 million? Yeah, one of Brunigan, Moraes, Minter, Declan Rice, Enzo Fernandez, long-term, they'll all pay off. If I'm buying one this week, I'd lean towards Minter, I think. Chance of both Timber and Richards being rotated? I think it's much higher than it usually is. Richards is more likely to be rested, I think, out of the 2. I could still see Timber starting, although in my original lineup that I showed you earlier, I had Ben White, so that's something I haven't fully settled on yet, but yeah, eventually Timber will get a rest. If it's not now, it's going to be next week against Club Brugge. I've only got Esteves cover, Senesi suspended, and I'm wondering if I can get away with not making a defensive transfer. I understand that because Senesi could offer decent value still when he comes back from suspension, and you want to focus your transfers in the midfield and forward positions if possible. But yeah, I think overall it might be worth making that defender move, especially if you believe both Timber and Richards will be rested and rotated. I don't see Mateta getting benched because their front three would be Pino, Nketiah, and maybe Kamada. Yeah. I mean, they could play Hughes in the midfield. They've got Lerma and a few other options, but yeah, I think rotation is going to be a big factor this week. I personally think Mateta will start. He's third in my list, but there are some doubts about his starting chances. Should I sell Mbeumo for Foden? No, I'd keep Mbeumo. I think against West Ham, they both have a high ceiling. You can always make this move in 15 or 16. Who's the best Senesi replacement? Top three defence midfield forwards aside the obvious. The best Senesi replacements would include Chow. I'd also be looking at Munoz, Timber, but Gabriel could be back, by the way, by the end of December, so that could be a boost for Arsenal. Van Dijk is solid at times, but yeah, Liverpool aren't fully trustworthy yet, especially defensively, but those would be up there amongst the best Senesi replacements. I think top three defenders overall would be Timber, Munoz, and I think Van Dijk. Midfield, this is much trickier, I think, because there are a lot of good options, but no one that really stands out above the rest. But I'd arguably say Declan Rice, Bruno Fernandes, because Mbeumo's off to AFCON soon. And the third one could even be someone like Bruno Guimaraes. I mean, it sounds crazy, but that's how things look like at the moment. With forwards, the obvious three would be Thiago, Mateta, and Haaland. Voltemada, Welbeck, and maybe Raul Jimenez. Hey Dylan, how's Senesi to Shaw? Not a big fan of United defenders. I think De Ligt would be the one I'd opt for if I had to pick, but yeah, just a few concerns about that. And ultimately with Luke Shaw, he is quite injury prone in general, but he has stayed fit so far this season, and hopefully it continues. Best Gameweek to bench boost, yeah, that's been covered as well. It's very team dependent. You've showed me your bench, but I don't know the rest of your squad, so that bench would look different in Gameweek 17 or 18 as opposed to now. So yeah, triple captain Haaland in 17 looks good. You might want to consider Gameweek 18 bench boost and use the 5 free transfers to your advantage there. Bench 1 Thiago or Chow. I'd still be tempted to start Thiago. He's got the highest ceiling, that's for sure. But based on my predictions, I'm going to say Chow. Thank you, Safair. As he says, like the video. Ndai, possibly, but he's getting close to AFCON. Yeah, I think with Ndai, he is a sell anyway. He's got tough fixtures. He's going to go off to AFCON, as you say. So that's going to be a massive blow for Everton. Yeah, I am looking at selling him myself, but I've got other fives to put out, like Ismail Assar. Do you think Gakpo starts? So, logically, you would think, yes, he is going to start because, look, I mean, if we think about it, he just scored and assisted against West Ham. And I think based on that, you know, keeping a winning formula, try to build some momentum, it would make sense. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Wirtz got the nod. In my current predicted 11, I've got Wirtz starting on the left and Salah being reintroduced on the right. I'm not sure if both Salah and Gakpo will start simultaneously here. Thank you, Sever. Hopefully another green arrow. I'll have to make transfers though, otherwise that's not going to happen because having Sarr in here, I mean, look, Dan Burn isn't too shabby. I mean, I think that's a decent pick. I might even be tempted to start him over one of my defenders, but yeah, there are definitely some holes to pick out. Buy Rice, I've been talking about this for a while. I think he is one of the best midfielders, and it's not just being second for points scored amongst midfielders. He's 1 point off top spot, which is Anton Semenyo, who has really fallen off a cliff since the Fulham game. -4, Sarr to Rice or Gakpo. Long term is still Rice for me. Sessegnon or Semenyo? Semenyo. Is it mad to make a free hit? Not necessarily, but I think this week is very risky with the amount of rotation we could see. Buy Barnes or Gakpo? If I had to pick, it would be Gakpo. I think Barnes will rotate with Gordon quite often. Will Marino start? I think Gyökeres will get some minutes. He might even start the game. Marino could still get the nod in the midfield, but I'm not entirely sure about that. Good to see you there, Bose. Rice or Minter? Overall, I think Rice is better. Now, in terms of timing, Minter looks more appealing this week against Aston Villa, but I do like Declan Rice overall. What do you think about Sells at keeper? Yeah, you don't need to, repeat that question a lot of times, mate. Yeah, Sells this week is fine. I wouldn't be in a rush to make other goalkeeper moves if you've also got Pope, for example. But long term, I think Raya the best one, and even Sanchez is in the podium of the best goalkeepers in FPL. So 1 second, my chat is freezing a little bit. I think YouTube might have some issues. I think Fulham could shock City. I hope so. A lot of City fans I've seen are also not too positive about it, but I still back them to win. They've got an incredible record against Fulham. If I'm playing my free hit, who do I definitely need? A United midfielder like Mbeumo or Bruno. You could even argue both. I think a Newcastle player or two, so one of Chow or Burn with Voltemada looks pretty promising. I would maybe risk it with Palace, with Munoz and Mateta, but there is also the possibility of rotation there. With Chelsea, it's probably an avoid for the most part. I mean, Cole Palmer could be worth a punt based on Maresca's comments. It looks like he's going to start. So, yeah, I think all of those are viable. Ekitike up front, Virgil van Dijk in the defensive line, maybe a Rice, Duran Timber, they're all solid, Bukayo Saka, but it's a question of prioritising, and those three teams I specifically focused on in Arsenal, Chelsea and Palace, they could all be three of the most heavily rotated teams in midweek. Yeah, this question has been asked a lot. Dubravka Vicaria, I'm going to say Dubravka again. Looking for a budget differential defender to replace Senesi, thoughts on Van Heck? He was covered in my wildcard video, so at 4.4 he offers reasonable value. What about Doku? I couldn't guarantee he starts, to be fair, but I think he will. In terms of starting him over Thiago, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, Doku's got one Premier League goal this season. He's very inconsistent when it comes to goal scoring. Lacroix or O'Reilly? Lacroix. Once again, though, rotation risk. Best captaincy pick, besides Haaland, I'd be looking at one of Mbeumo, Mateta or Fernandes, in that order. Senesi, Sarr to Anderson, Bruno Guimaraes, Szoboszlai. I'd pick Bruno Guimaraes over Szoboszlai, who is one yellow card away from suspension. Hey, Dylan, downgrade Pope to Lamins for a -4 to find... Is that Sarr to Bruno? I'm not sure about that. Yeah, I'd start Dubravka and buy Minter for no hit, to be fair. And next week or the week after, you can buy Raya or Sanchez to replace Nick Pope for free. It's not worth buying Lamins for a hit, in my opinion. Is Szoboszlai a good option for Sarr? He's decent, but that suspension risk is in the back of my mind. And also, I think there are better midfielders elsewhere, like Bruno Guimaraes, Enzo Fernandez, and Minter, Rice. All of these players are going to be better. Start James O'Reilly. I don't think James starts, so I'm going to say O'Reilly. Hi, Dylan, pick one, Van der Ven or Kudus. Kudus. Start one, Gravenberch, Anderson, Sessegnon. From those three players, I'm going to go for Gravenberch. Which three defenders to play? Lacroix. I'd play one Arsenal defender. I think Hincapié will start. And probably Gusto. I would back him to start the game. Weiseng says should be an easy win for City. I'm not sure about easy, but I think they will win. Captain Minter, Mbeumo, Voltemada or Semenyo. From those players, it's going to be Mbeumo, despite the recent downturn in form. So, it's probably worth going through certain things one more time. We do have 47 minutes left until the deadline, so make sure to lock in your squads and make sure you're happy with the way things have turned out. But this is the FDR. The bottom teams include Aston Villa, Sunderland, Spurs, Wolves and Leeds, whilst Liverpool, Man United, Newcastle, Arsenal and Man City complete the top 5. With predicted points, Eze, Semenyo, Salah, Rice, Mateta are just outside the top 5. Amad Diallo is also quite highly ranked, but Yeah, Bruno Fernandes, Mbeumo, Saka and Haaland is the top 4. And I do agree with 3 of them. And Saka, to be fair, is a good option in general. With projected price changes, I'm going to refresh this, but it looks like Bruno Fernandes, Minter, Rice, Chow and Esteval could all go up in price, whilst a lot of players could go down, like Senesi, Okafor, Bogle, Goodmanson, Pope, Bowen, Ekitike, Kilman, Iwobi, Pape Matar Sarr, and the list continues for a little while longer. So Lauren, Anthony, O'Brien and Donovan could also suffer a price decrease, but I wouldn't count on it. Not all of them anyway. With stats, I'm comparing Bruno Fernandes and Haaland again. When it comes to my setup without using the wild card, it's down to these 2 players. And I think Fernandes is the most likely to take the captaincy off Erling Haaland, but the stats are still heavily in the Norwegians' favour, especially when it comes to goal scoring. But Bruno Fernandes is second to none when it comes to key passes and creativity. And this is a visualization of how my squad looks like with 2 free transfers potentially. So Foden to replace Sarr and then Welbeck taking the place of Joao Pedro. I could also start Dan Burn. I also wouldn't mind that so much. And the alternative is the wildcard to something like this. And even Cole Palmer is a nice punt for Game Week 14. But a lot of these players that I would even bring in on the wildcard are subject to rotation at some stage in December. So Enzo Fernandez, maybe Bukayo Saka, Munoz, even Jurrien Timber. They're not all fully safe. I know Riley has been locked in at left back, but that could well change very soon. When it comes to FPL Challenge, this is my current squad with Raya, Munoz, Mbeumo captain, Enzo, Salah, and Haaland. But I need to remember to change this based on the lineups and acting accordingly, because a few players like Enzo could also be rested during midweek. So what you're going to see here are my scoreline predictions. And I think most of them are locked in, but there's always room for improvement. So Bournemouth 2, Everton 1, Fulham 1, Man City 3, Newcastle 2, Tottenham 0, Arsenal 2, Brentford 1, Brighton 2, Aston Villa 2, Burnley 0, Crystal Palace 2, Wolves 1, Nottingham Forest 1, Leeds 0, Chelsea 2, Liverpool 2, Sunderland 0, Man United 3, West Ham 1. So next up is going to be the team weakness and heat map. So I'm focusing on West Ham once again, but I think the main focus here will be on the clean sheet odds and the top 10 captains. So I'm going to go through that now and then go back to my FPL team and start making some actual moves. So with the clean sheet odds taken by the website fantasyfootballpundit.com, Arsenal are top, facing Brentford at home. Liverpool, Crystal Palace, Man United, Chelsea and Man City are in the top 5, with West Ham in last place, facing Man United away, with an 11% chance of keeping a clean sheet. And here with the top 10 captains, which has been such a highly requested question, you could say, Haaland is still top, but not by much. I think Mbeumo, Mateta, Fernandes could usurp him for the best captaincy option this week. Foden is also highly ranked, with Saka in 6th, Semenyo, Voltemada, Palmer and Munoz in the top 10. I think Palmer will start against Leeds based on Enzo Maresca's comments today. So I'm now going to go to my FPL squad and also the transfer section. I think it's worth going to that. So let's see if the price change overnight will have impacted anything. So with Foden, yeah, I can still afford Foden and Thiago. That's something I am considering. Even despite, you know, the orange flag to Ismaila Sarr, having Reinildo and a few kind of rotation risks, it's not absolutely necessary, in my opinion, to use both free transfers, but I think one will be used, and Sarr is obviously the one that screams out as a must-replace option. But it's not just Phil Foden who's crossing my mind, it's also Bruno Guimaraes, Minter, Enzo Fernandez, Declan Rice, all these midfielders I discussed in this podcast and throughout my wildcard and trans tips videos as well. So that's something I need to weigh up as well. Not just Igor Thiago is, you know, kind of crossing my mind in terms of the forwards, but also Danny Welbeck. I think that could also happen, especially as a short-term punt. I've got the wild card in my back pocket, and that's when I can bring in Igor Thiago with more plum fixtures on paper. So I'm going to put a poll out here and then go through member questions first and then start, you know, locking things in for this Game Week 14 deadline. Okay, so one of these options will be, yeah, Sarr and Joao Pedro. And it's going to be to Foden and Igor Thiago / Welbeck. Okay, so let's get this here. Okay, that is not what I wanted. Okay, so yeah, Foden and Thiago. I mean, to be honest, I could even go for something a little bit different. But yeah, it would probably require -4 hit or finding an even cheaper forward to facilitate this sort of move. And I think that would be forcing it, to be fair. But yeah, if I had enough money to buy Mbumo, I would consider it this week. And then I can get rid of him with AFCON transfers in 16 and also the wildcard in my back pocket. But yeah, drop a like on the stream. Let's get to 150. It would be massively appreciated. We just got to 100. So 150 there very soon and close in on 38k on YouTube. So yeah, I think the other moves would include Rice. Yeah, I'm going to go for something like this. So Rice and Thiago potentially. And yeah, with 0.8, I literally just could make one transfer. So yeah. So Sarr to Rice. I'm also going to put Bruno Guimaraes in here. Bruno Guimaraes. And I think apart from that, Enzo would also enter the equation, or Minter. Yeah, that's the other one I'm looking at. So yeah, I think that would be it. And also something else would be Eze. Whilst keeping Joao Pedro, who I could even bench this week. Yeah, Eze would be a little bit off, actually. 7.4, so yeah, 0.4 million off from that. So these are my transfer plans for Gameweek 14. You can see that now in the poll. So make sure to vote and let your feelings be known. Would you buy Timber? I only have Saka and Raya. Or wait for Gabriel to be back? A lot depends on the context. I mean, who are you selling to get Timber? Is it Marcus Senesi or somebody else? But yeah, I do like Timber still long term. So and die to Foden or Gakpo? I prefer Foden, as mentioned earlier. Making me waver from Bruno, says Tustapaki, because City have won the past 80 meetings versus Fulham since 2012, which is the longest winning run by a team against any opponent in the entire history of English football, scoring 54 and only conceding 7. Yeah, that is pretty crazy when you put it like that. But these stats have to come to an end at some point, right? And Fulham were very close last season at the Etihad, but City, despite all their woes in the previous campaign, still got back-to-back wins against them, home and away. Thank you, Lager. Good evening, Dylan. Well done with your climb the last game weeks. You really seem to have found a momentum. Yeah, cheers for that. I mean, still, you know, a few gripes with some decisions, but these things can happen. It's still not the end of the world. I mean, I've got the wild card in my back pocket, which is the most powerful booster. So the kind of hope there is to solidify myself into a solid position and then creep into that top 100k and stay there whilst, you know, trying to find my best ever rank. But that's going to be a very difficult task, especially this season. I do recognize that. Best 2 goalkeepers to pick. I mean, I think Raya is absolutely fine. Then just have a backup like Dubravka. But yeah, in isolation, probably Ryan Sanchez. I just wouldn't go for both simultaneously. Voltemada is a solid captaincy choice. He is 8th in my list, I believe. Should I bring in Enzo for Caicedo? He could be benched. Just bear that in mind. But I do like Enzo Fernandez. play 3-5-2, Mateta and Welbeck as my front two and possible captains, or save the transfer and play a 4-4-2. Yeah, I'm just wondering what the alternative would be. So if you play a 4-4-2, who's the defender? Is it Dan Burn or what? But yeah, with Enzo, I'd be a bit cautious this week. Who do I captain? Mateta, Haaland, or Thiago? I prefer Haaland. I was asked this earlier. I will not be captaining Thiago against Arsenal. Voltemada to Mateta. I like Mateta this week. I think he'll start, but Voltemada looks very appealing for the next two against Tottenham and Burnley at home. Calafiori or Richards? I prefer Richards. Right now, I have Anderson, Minter, Mbumo, and Dewsbury Hall, and 9 million in the bank for one mid. Who should I buy? Bruno Fernandes would be appealing, even though you've got Mbumo already, but I think Fernandes is still worth the purchase, and then you can sell Mbumo in a couple of weeks' time. If Rise goes up to 7.1 overnight, he will not count as a 7 million player for Challenge Fantasy, right? Yeah, he won't. His price change will be reflected in FPL Challenge 2. Neto, Bruno, or Thiago, who should I get this week? Bruno. Buy Bruno Guimaraes for Sarr or another. I like Bruno Guimaraes. He's in my poll. He's a very serious contender to replace Ismaila Sarr. But there's also Minter, Declan Rice, Enzo Fernandez, long term. So it just depends on your budget too. But I do like Bruno Guimaraes. Anderson instead of Sarr, or Bruno and Krupi Jr. instead of Sarr and Voltemada for a -4 hit. I think Anderson's a good option, and he offers reasonable value. He is 5.4 million, but I do like the Bruno transfer. It's just selling Voltemada for a -4 hit, which is kind of what puts me off a little bit. I'm probably going to say free transfer. Start 2, Van Dijk, Richards, and Chow. Difficult one. I think Richards could be benched this week. It's a possibility, but I would bench Chow and have him ready to come on if needed. What do you think of Savona as a short-term pick? Wolves away looks good. I am backing Wolves to score though, but on paper Forest would be up there for the clean sheet odds. I do prefer other defenders though. Minter more explosive, Anderson steady Eddie. Yeah, Anderson's very consistent. Minter, I mean, he's more explosive than Anderson because he offers more attacking threat, but having said that, he's also not like the most explosive player in the world. He's someone who can give you 4 to 8 points on a regular basis, and I'd take that from a 6.2 million midfielder. Barnes or Minter to replace Sarr? Minter. Hi Dylan, thoughts on Semenyo to Foden? Thinking of using my bench boost this game week? I would keep Semenyo for this week, despite all the problems and all the downturn in form. I still think Everton at home is a good fixture for him. And as many people say, Fulham could be a tricky fixture for City in the end, despite their horrendous record against the Citizens. I've gone Barnes over Bruno Guimaraes, saves you some money and seems more exciting. Well, Barnes has been in great form, but I think the last match against Everton wasn't great. And Gordon's back. There's going to be rotation. There's a Champions League game next week, so I'm just not fully sold on Harvey Barnes. Hello, mate. Thoughts on Minter, Munoz in to replace Senesi and Sarr? I like it. Like with any Palace player this week, you could say Munoz is a rotation risk, but on paper, he's one of the best defenders in the game, alongside Jiri and Timber, and Minter is solid for his price. In Die or Reinders, in Die, start 1, it's going to be Semenyo here, for Alfred's question. Adnan asks Barnes or Minter or Bruno Guimaraes? Minter. I do like Bruno Guimaraes though. He's a close second in my opinion. Very, very close second. So, who to bench? Watkins, Evanosson, Delap, and Die. From those players, I'd start Delap. I think he's going to start this week, and Watkins as well. Oddly enough, it's between Evanosson and Ndiaye to bench. I would possibly consider benching Evanosson. Yeah, I'm not surprised about that easy, but yeah, unfortunately, because of the calendar, the way things work, it's always difficult to fit it into the schedule. Dylan, Minter or Anderson for Sarr. I like both of them, but Minter. Sarr to Minter or Senesi to Riley, Chow for a -4. I would go for Sarta Minter instead. Doku or Minter for the starting 11. Minter again. Bruno Guimaraes or Enzo. This week, I'm leaning towards Bruno Guimaraes. Thank you, Punjabi. As he says, let's get this stream to as many likes as possible. 150 plus is the aim. And also subscribe, hit the notification bell, check the links in the description. There's my Spotify, Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, and also my FPL and FPL Challenge Leagues. Hey, Dylan, downgrade. Hope to Lamin Sanchez for a -4. Yeah, once again, with this -4 hit for a goalkeeper, it's a no from me. I'd rather just start Dubravka, as covered earlier. Is it worth changing Xhaka to Anderson when I know I'll bench him most weeks anyway? I'd only do that if you feel like it's something that could benefit you, at least in the short term. Because even if you plan to bench Anderson sort of longer term, he could do a really good job for you within the next 2-3 game weeks, and then he does his part as a squad player. So ultimately, I don't see it as a massive upgrade, but Anderson would be the preference in a wildcard, or, you know, if you didn't know what to do with your transfers, you wanted to use them because you get 5 in Game Week 16 anyway, then in that sort of scenario, I think Anderson works fairly well, but I certainly wouldn't do it for a hit, which obviously you're not doing here. Petrovic or Verbruggen? This week, Petrovic. Hey, Dylan, who's the best replacement for Thiago? I don't know why you'd want to sell Thiago, but if I was buying a striker this week, it's probably Voltemada, considering the next 2 fixtures in general, and Voltemada should start. There are more concerns about Jean-Philippe Mateta. Well, Haaland's top of my captaincy list in Bumo second, but I am quite open to changing it. So going against Haaland with a United midfielder, or possibly Mateta as well. Thank you, Lager, for moderating the chat. Neto or Rodgers for this week? Neto. He is also a bigger rotation risk, though. Bruno or Haaland for captaincy? Yeah, Haaland's first, Bruno's fourth on my list, but once again, I'm open to changing it a little bit. So my poll, Sarr and Joao Pedro to Foden and Welbeck, is narrowly leading. In second is Sarr to Minter, which is quite interesting. Semenyo captain tonight. Numbers indicate a big haul incoming soon for him. Yeah, but when he was doing really well, I mean, conversely, the numbers suggested a downturn. I mean, numbers are always a decent sign, but you can always get a massive over or underperformance from certain players. But I think Semenyo will do well in the coming weeks. I don't mind keeping him against Everton, but he needs to produce because he has been awful for a month or two now at this point. So we do have less than half an hour left until the deadline. Let's make sure to lock in the teams. I'll be making moves very soon. Interesting. Danny Welbeck has only got 1 goal against Villa during his time at Brighton, but yeah, he got a few goals for Arsenal and United. Yeah, mainly United. His record isn't particularly great against them. 5 goals, 1 assist in 15 matches. I mean, it's not terrible, but yeah, I mean, Welbeck would be a very short-term punt in my 15-man squad. Voltemada is a good captaincy option, but nothing spectacular. He hasn't got a single double-digit haul this season, so I'd rather captain someone with that higher ceiling, like in Boomer. Start Thiago, O'Reilly, or Eze. Have Rice and Timber for cover. Also, take a -4 for Caicedo for bench cover. I wouldn't take a hit just for bench cover, no. With the first question, I would start... I'm just not sure if Eze starts. That's the problem. Otherwise, he would be the winner. Yeah, if you back Eze to start, I would go for him. But just bear in mind, Arsenal could rotate quite heavily. Rice and Timber are cover, so take -4? No. Thanks for answering and giving respectful consideration to each question. It's really appreciated. Thank you very much, Steve-O. If you got one, then let me know. My team? Rate my team, please. Okay. Assuming that rotation doesn't bite you quite hard, I think it's a solid squad. It's probably an 8 out of 10, I'd say. If you wanted to give me a number. If you wanted me to give you a number, I should say. Yeah. I just think with the rotation risk, be careful with Joao Pedro, Enzo, possibly Mateta. And then you're looking at, I think the rest are probably fine. Lacroix is another possibility, but I'd be more concerned about Richards. I want to take Gakpo to replace Caicedo, but Caicedo's price fall and can't buy Gakpo because of 0.1. Really think Gakpo can make the difference. Top 10 midfield for points and XGI. I'm not as keen on Gakpo. I had him for a while and sold him a couple of weeks ago, and it seemed like good timing, but yeah, almost had him on the free hit again. The rest is history, but it just depends, really. I think Liverpool will rotate quite a lot in this Christmas period. With Salah heading off to AFCON, I think Gakpo will start most matches. I know they don't compete directly for the same position, but I think it's possible that we saw Gakpo start against West Ham, and now it's going to be Salah against Sunderland, and then you get Wirtz providing a bit more balance on the other flank. But yeah, I understand the frustrations. You wanted to get Gakpo. You might still want to make that possible, but I wouldn't do it for a -4 hit. I like Enzo Fernandez long term, but there is a chance he doesn't start against Leeds. Should I start Lacroix and Bruno Guimaraes or double up on Palace defence and then skip Bruno Guimaraes? Depends who the other Palace defender is. If it's Munoz, I'd just start him. But if it's like Richards, who I do like still, then that's where I would have some second thoughts about it. Dylan, would you sell Senesi because of the price fall tonight and go for someone else? It's not just that. It's also the suspension against Everton at home. Then you have to wait quite a while for a plum fixture against Burnley. And I don't see many clean sheets for Bournemouth, who have been quite poor defensively over the last couple of weeks. So I would be tempted to sell. Take it for Mateta since he's a doubt. He's only doubtful in terms of, the minutes and stuff. I still think he'll start personally, but it would not surprise me to see him benched. But I think the Sarr injury might have maybe shifted the plans a little bit, because Nketiah is normally the like-for-like Mateta replacement, and now they might even start together against Burnley. Doku or Minter for the starting 11? Minter. Bruno or Haaland captain, and would you double up on Palace defence versus Burnley? I've said Haaland all along, but once again, I'm open to captaining a Bruno or Mbeumo against him, but it's about picking your moments, and over the last couple of weeks, going against Haaland has worked, provided you captained a player who actually did something. Yeah, I don't mind doubling up on Palace defensively against Burnley, but rotation is going to be a big factor this week. Captain Mbeumo over Saka and Haaland. Over Saka, yes. Haaland is debatable. I think Mbeumo is the closest adversary to Erling Haaland this week. Is it worth transferring Bruno with my midfield pack of Enzo, Saka, Ndiaye, Mbeumo and Semenyo? But then how would you make it work? Who's being sold in this instance? I mean, if it's Ndiaye, then fair enough. I'd be very open to it. But selling one of Mbeumo or Saka to Fernandes, I probably wouldn't do that yet. I think Mbeumo to Fernandes looks good in Gameweek 16 instead. The wildcard I'm quite open-minded about, but it might even be a case of waiting until after Gameweek 16, essentially, and still have 5 free transfers there. Munoz is 10th on my Campsy list, but because of the suspension risk and also the congested schedule in December, I would not be shocked about Munoz being benched or having his minutes managed. Mateta is 3rd in my Campsy list. I like him. Freya is Gordon instead of Mbeumo to go against the template. Gordon has no goals and assists in the Premier League this season, though. I know he's going to get something eventually, but it's not a terrible idea. I think Gordon will start. Decent record against the Big Six, and that includes Tottenham. But I think Mbeumo is still worth including on the free hit. 2 Tottenham players and Caicedo. Should I free hit? I mean, that's not terrible, I guess, but if you've also got Chelsea, Palace, Arsenal players, I mean, they could all be rested, or most of them could. So it just depends on the context of your 50-man squad. But for what you're saying alone, it doesn't look horrible. You don't need to free hit. Who's the better option out of Rice and Minter? I think long-term is probably Rice. If I were to buy one this week, though, with an eye of wildcarding in 15 to 17, then I would be tempted by Minter. Senesi to Chow looks solid. I've been talking about that in my transfer tips. I think Chow is one of the best replacements for the Argentine. Senesi and Caicedo out for Timber and Enzo for a -4. Have Rodon, Guiu, Sarr on the bench. Sarr to Anderson next game week. I like it overall. Just a bit concerned, and the same goes for any of these Arsenal-Chelsea players, about buying them in this week, but long-term it should pay off. Bench Barnes or Thiago? Maybe I'd bench Thiago in this instance, but I also think Gordon could start over Barnes. but both of those players are capable of scoring or assisting off the bench against Tottenham. Is O'Reilly a risk for substitution this game week? Yes, I think so. The same goes for Gvardiol, Mateus Nunes, and a few other City players. No worries, Jugmade. Cheers for the answer earlier. In that case, who would you bench this week out of Doku, Anderson, and Minter? It's a close one, but I would consider benching Doku. Hi, Dylan. Best Pope replacements. Would you go for Sells? Not necessarily. It's either Raya or Robert Sanchez for me. Even Verbruggen might be ranked higher than Sells for me long term. Is a solid defensive cover getting tough this season? I think it changes a little bit, right? I mean, Gabriel was essential. He got injured. Virgil van Dijk started okay, then had a horrible spell as Liverpool kept on losing. Daniel Munoz has been fairly consistent, just like Timber, so I think both of them speak for themselves, but you've also got alternatives in the Crystal Palace and Arsenal defences, so you've got other options there to save some money. But yeah, I think it has changed a little bit, but if I think back to when I wildcarded, when I built my Gameweek 1 team or started making defender transfers, you know, a lot of the structure is still quite similar to what I would plan on the wildcard, having a Newcastle defender. Instead of Dan Burn, it'd be Chow, but it's still quite similar in practice. So I think it goes both ways, but yeah, maybe in terms of finding differentials or something consistent and reliable that's going under the radar, I think that's the problem. Start one of Joachim Anderson or Dan Burn. Dan Burn. I think Burn will start, yeah. Gibbs White or Rice? This week, Gibbs White, but if I'm buying one long term, it's going to be Rice all day long. Hi, Dylan. Welbeck or Mateta? Jean-Philippe Mateta. Sarr and Pope to Foden or Verbruggen? Yeah, I'd make those transfers. If it's one or the other, then Sarr to Foden is obviously what I'd recommend. Mateta or Mbumo captain? Mbumo, he is second in my list. Mateta's third. Is it worth getting Anderson in a -4 and then start him over Thiago? Yes, I think so. Well, I think long term it's worth buying in Anderson, but it depends on several things. Who are you selling to get Anderson? I think Thiago could still walk away from the Emirates with a goal from a penalty, so if it was me, I wouldn't take the hit. My second Palace defender is Gay. Looks decent, and he should start. Sydney says, my defence is Raya, Dubravka, Gabriel Munoz, Senesi, Mukiele, and Goodmanson. I have one free transfer and 0.0 in the bank. Which defender would you bring in for Gabriel? So you've got Munoz already. That's great. It's either Timber or Munoz for me, but sorry, you've already got Munoz. I think Van Dijk would also enter the equation, but there is the possibility here of maybe going for a cheaper defender. And what that also allows you to do is upgrade one of Mukiele or Goodmanson, so then you've got more squad depth, essentially. Because I think in the case of the Leeds and Sunderland defenders, they've got poor fixtures, they're quite cheap, and they're not going to get many clean sheets or points for you. So you're just going to have them sit on your bench and not really offer too much in terms of value, in my opinion. So that's something else you might want to think about. Go from Gabriel to Chow, and then use those funds to upgrade Mukiele or Goodmanson, at least to a Van Heck, as one example. Golden puts his team. Could go Sanchez and get Munoz instead of more expensive midfield, like Minter, Rice, etc. So Pope, Senesi, Sarr to Raya, Lacroix, Anderson. Looks good for me. It looks pretty decent, but yeah. If you could buy Sanchez and Munoz, that does look slightly better, if I dare say so. Welbeck or Thiago to start, it would be Welbeck for me. Replacing Senesi, but can't decide between Chow or O'Reilly. I'd lean towards Chow, because Newcastle have excellent long-term fixtures, and Chow seems quite nailed on. Bench Thiago or Reinders? Reinders on the bench. Play Van der Ven or -4 to replace Senesi. Yeah, I don't like Van der Ven against Newcastle. I'd probably play Van der Ven. Hi, Dylan. Thoughts on Chow replacing Konsa? I like Chow. I talked about him in my Transfers video yesterday, and he's been very impressive. I've talked about his performances for a while now, and I think that brace against Everton has caught everyone's attention from an FPL perspective. Should I captain Haaland? My rank overall is 9k. Well, I've got Haaland top of my list, but I'm very tempted by United midfielder this week, so that's where Fernandes could come into play for me. and I do rate Mbeumo quite highly against West Ham, so I'm certainly open-minded to going for Mbeumo, but if you refer simply to my captaincy list, I did have Haaland top. So, captaining Mateta, he has predicted to start in most lineups. I think he will start as well. Locking in, thanks for answering the queries, brother. All the best and cheers, folks. Thank you very much. Hopefully you do well this week. And for everyone else watching, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We've got just over 60 minutes left until the deadline. And Sarr Minter is now narrowly leading the vote, while Sarr and Joao Pedro to Foden and Welbeck is second. But yeah, that's fairly interesting, actually. So just having a look at different websites, seeing if there's any news, but I don't think we're going to get anything. Yeah. I think transfers are quite awkward this week, and there is a lot of fear of rotation, which plays a part anyway. When it comes to my starting 11, Dan Burn could also make it in, and the captaincy could be shifted to Bruno Fernandes. So I think the next 15 minutes or so could also lead to a lot of changes, or at least a few changes, which are quite notable in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah. In terms of replacing Sarr, I am quite open about this. I think Joao Pedro could also make way. Looking at alternative solutions as well, I don't think anything else really screams to me. Even in Dye, yeah, replacing him, I just don't think it's like absolutely necessary there. So yeah, I'm going to go for, at the moment, what I'm kind of leaning towards is the Welbeck Foden route. And we'll see how that kind of turns out. I could even go for Gakpo, you know, and have that Liverpool midfielder. Hopefully he can make up for the points I kind of lost out on last week, but yeah, there's never a guarantee. Ultimately, these are kind of short-term transfers because I've got the wildcard in my back pocket, so it's possible to go a bit aggressive here. I don't even mind Bruno Guimaraes, but I've already got Burn and Voltemada. But yeah, I think with 8.2 million, I think Foden would be the one. That's kind of what appeals to me the most, but very close decision here. How do you feel when Arsenal tied with 10-man Chelsea? A bit disappointed, frustrated, but look, it was a big week for Arsenal. It took a lot out of them. They got a massive win against Bayern Munich, who are one of the best teams in Europe. They beat Tottenham 4-1. They're still top of the Premier League table and the Champions League group, so despite the frustrations and an opportunity missed, I mean, yeah, I still understand the context as well. Saliba missing out, you know, just a day or so off or before the game. He got a knock in training, so unfortunately, these things happen. Chelsea also missed some key players. Palmer wasn't even able to come on because of the red card, but yeah, based on the game situation, Arsenal should have done a little bit more in terms of upping the tempo and, you know, the intensity to really break down Chelsea's low block. Safair says, Alderete, first sub, transfer out Sarr or Senesi now? I transfer out Sarr, because at least Senesi is available for Game Week 15, while Sarr is going to be out for a while now. For me, just pick it and hope for luck. Yes, but I do like to put thought into the moves I make, even if they end up horribly. What about Eze for Sarr? Slight concern with Eze in terms of starting the next two Premier League games. I think he'll start against Villa, but with his Brentford one, I think Arsenal could have a different looking midfield with Norgard in there. I think Odegaard could also get the nod. And whilst Arsenal have played Eze and Odegaard before in the same team, it's not going to be a common theme over the coming weeks, in my opinion. So I'm a bit hesitant about buying Eze and most Arsenal players this week. Would you do Saliba to Munoz? Yes, I would. Bear in mind that Saliba will be back very soon, probably for the Aston Villa game. Yeah, Haaland will start for Man City. I'm pretty sure of that. I'm on Saka captain and playing Richards over Mateta. What do you think? I like the Saka captaincy. He is 6th in my list. It's just a question of the minutes and will Arsenal rotate heavily, but they've got another opportunity in the Champions League next week, albeit Club Brugge are decent, so they could be caught out cold by that. Playing Richards over Mateta, not for me. I think Mateta's more likely to start than Richards anyway, and he's got the higher ceiling. Thank you very much, Stanis. I appreciate it. Kind of risky taking Joao Pedro off as Leeds. Yes, but it's also risky keeping him because Chelsea are expected to rotate. That's the thing. And with Joao Pedro afterwards, you've got tough fixtures. I mean, there's not a clear answer. If I had the information and I knew Joao Pedro was starting, then obviously I would avoid the Danny Welbeck transfer. That goes without saying. But that's my only way of funding Phil Foden. Yeah, Eze deserves a shout, but once again, minutes are going to be all over the place for a lot of key assets this week. And in my opinion, Eze could be benched. Andre Santos probably plays for 2 games. Yeah, I'd expect him to start the next match. That's for sure. Start one of Joachim Andersen or Dan Burn. Dan Burn, as mentioned earlier. My starting defenders are Gay, Chalobah and Timber. Look solid if they all start. No leaks as far as I'm aware, Paredes, but I will have a look again. Saliba probably won't start against Brentford, but against Villa, I think he'll be in the lineup. Do I play Jacques or Thiago? Thiago. Which player that should be performing this game week will likely be disappointing? I think a lot depends on the minutes and rotation, but that could easily be one of the United midfielders. It could be Saka. It's very difficult to tell, but yeah, I'd have to think about that. There's a lot of players and ifs, buts and maybes, and I think rotation is the biggest headache this week. Saliba to Munoz. I'd probably still go for it. Munoz has a higher ceiling, and Saliba's been a bit underwhelming this season from an FPL perspective. Do I go Sarr to Foden or Sarr to Foden and Pedro to Voltemada? I'd go for the Voltemada transfer as well. I mean, you're doing the same midfield transfer anyway in both scenarios. It's just a question of do you go for Pedro to Voltemada, and I'd go for it personally. Why do you prefer Minter or Bruno than Gakpo or Anderson? Well, Bruno's more consistent than Gakpo. That goes without saying. I know Gakpo got a massive return last week, but yeah, even with the minutes and stuff, he's going to start most games for Liverpool, but not every single one. There are no such concerns with Fernandes at Man United, and yeah, I like Anderson. He's very consistent, but Minter's going to offer you more goal threat and assist potential. Is there a good game week left to bench boost? Very team dependent, but you might want to look at game week 17 or 18. If you do have the triple captaincy, then my advice is to use it in 17 on Haaland against West Ham at home, and then bench boost in game week 18. Will Gibbs White play? I think so, yeah, based on the reports I saw. Thank you, KS. Hi, Dylan. Hope you're well. Free went well last week, but I came back to my main team of Caicedo, Sarr, and Senesi causing issues. Took a -4 and bought in Anderson and Minter. Could have been a -8. That can happen after a free hit. I mean, 2 of those players were still available. Senesi was walking the tightrope. Caicedo got a stupid red card. I think he could have been rotated against Leeds anyway, in the case of the Ecuadorian, but to miss 3 matches, he had to be dealt with in your FPL squad. But yeah, -4, -8, it is understandable in this sort of situation. Why going Welbeck and not Thiago? So just to make it clear, this transfer is not locked in, and it's because I've got the wild card in my back pocket. I prefer Thiago over Welbeck, but not for this week, where I think Welbeck has a higher ceiling. And it also allows me to buy Phil Foden. And yes, I can also afford Igor Thiago that way, but yeah, ultimately I think with Thiago, the best time to buy him would be game week 15. And that's where I could wildcard, if not shortly afterwards. 1 free transfer, Cunha from Marino or Timber for James. So Cunha to Marino or Timber in for James. Yeah, I prefer the Timber transfer. Is Harvey Barnes going to play today? I think he'll be a substitute. I'm backing Gordon to get the nod. First sub Van de Ven or Ndai? Ndai. He's better than Van de Ven this week. On paper anyway. 1 free transfer, drop Pedro for Voltemada. My answer is yes. And now I remembered before I went to pick Gakpo, Foden tempted me but can't afford it. Yeah, well, in that case, you might just want to settle for Gakpo, but I'm still a bit hesitant about him. So just going to have a last look on Twitter and see if there are any updates or leaks, but I wouldn't count on it. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I don't really see anything at the moment on Twitter. So we do have just over 6 minutes left. Let's lock in. Also checking my phone, seeing if there's anything, but I honestly don't see. Yeah, so yeah, I'm also going to put a captaincy poll, and it'll be kind of related to my situation. Let's get the likes up to 150. We're very close to that goal already. And let's close in on 38k subscribers on YouTube. But unfortunately, I couldn't see anything in terms of team news or injury updates. So yeah. Sartominta is the recommended transfer by the people. I do think it's important having 2 free transfers as well. I think that could also be pretty nice. But yeah. Of course, we are going to use these transfers anyway. Going into Gameweek 16, you want to use your transfers if you can, because then you get 5 regardless of your situation. But yeah, Joao Pedro's an interesting one. I mean, if I had more confidence about whether he starts or not, that would probably determine my transfer plans quite easily. But we don't have that information, so it's going to be a mad one. I'm looking at one Chelsea lineup here, and yeah, no Joao Pedro either. Yeah, so I mean, with some of these Chelsea lineups, I see Joao Pedro, but I think in most of them, he's not in it. So yeah, I think that would be the concern. I could just start Dan Burn and go for a back 4, but I think the 2 free transfers is what I'm going to go for. So Foden and Welbeck. And we'll see if Man City rotate, but if they take Fulham for mugs, they could be caught cold. So yeah, very close one this week, I think, with my transfers. Minter, or do I go for the 2 moves? But as highlighted in my team selection, I was looking at something like this. Then it's just down to, can I find a different striker potentially over Danny Welbeck? But I don't think many of them scream out to me. Not at this price point and below. I mean, Thiago's going to be the one I bring in on the wildcard anyway, so I'm quite happy with that. But yeah, I think Danny Welbeck might be the one, actually. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I'm going to go for. So 2 players who were in my Gameweek 13 free hit. They're going to reprise their roles here, but this time with free transfers. We've got 3.5 minutes left. And to replace Sarr, I am going for Phil Foden, who was the hero for me in the previous deadline. I look at the other names here. I mean, Gakpo could be an option. Mbeumo would be the preference, actually, but I'm 0.4 million off from the Cameroonian, and I'm not going to take a -4 hit to fund that move necessarily. And if Jimenez had a better fixture this week, then maybe I would have gone for that, but I am not entirely sold on this. So yeah, now it's time to just get things done, and I think that's pretty much it in terms of my decisions. So Welbeck and Foden are going to come in, and the rest is history. So Sarr and Joao Pedro are out. If Joao Pedro starts, then yeah, I'm not going to like it, but it is what it is. So Foden will come in. I've got Triple City, by the way. I've got Rangers in there still, but yeah, we can ignore that. Dan Burn first on the bench. That's pretty decent cover, in my opinion. He might even be a starter, I think, for some people. But yeah, I've got a few penalty takers here in Dai, Semenyo, and Bruno Fernandes. Obviously, Erling Haaland up front. So the last thing I'm going to put is the captaincy poll, and this is going to be my last decision to make. So people are saying they can't hit anything. Yeah, that's kind of weird. Maybe I cut out for a second or something, but yeah, I'll look into it. Or maybe I just wasn't speaking. There was a time where I wasn't speaking as I was doing my transfers. Yeah, FPL Challenge is not really a big deal, though, because you've got until each individual match to lock things in. So Fernandes and Haaland will be the two options. I'm not overcomplicating this. But yeah, we've got 1 minute left until the deadline. Yeah, they're trolling. Yeah, I'm not sure why they'll do that, but yeah, everyone has their own thing. Yeah, welcome, Jar. Good to see you. Anderson versus Nico Riley. I'd be tempted by Anderson here. That's Elliot Anderson, by the way. Start Joao Pedro, Joachim Anderson. Joao Pedro. Yeah, thank you, Lager, and everyone else who reassured me there, I guess. I was surprised by that comment. Captain Mbumo, yeah, looks decent. Yeah, I think that's pretty solid. Yeah, I get that, Zane. I mean, look, we'll see what happens, but Foden did the business for me this week. I hope Welbeck can do it now. But yeah, I'm giving Welbeck another chance. That bad luck since this FPL manager known for captaining top players and then blanking. Yeah, well, I think we all have our moments of bad luck when it comes to this game. Senesi to Chow, Paqueta to Anderson, and Grealish to Minter -4. Yeah, I like it overall, and we are literally about to lock in, so make sure everything is set up for you. But looking at this squad, yeah, I think all of the transfers make sense, and they're all upgrades, actually. I don't think Saliba starts against Brentford, but against Villa, that's a different story. A big up to Paredes for gifting 5 memberships. So, yeah, thank you to Paredes, and big up to Safair, Kiddo11, also to Chidarul, Mandip, and also Alicia. Enjoy that membership for an entire month. And also, thanks, Mina, for the super chat. No questions, bro. Just wanted to say thank you. Well, that's much appreciated. I know you put some great questions and comments in the live chat. We've now hit our super chat goal. And building upon Paredes' great work and gifting 10 memberships, I'll be doing that myself now. And it's completely random. YouTube are the ones deciding, not me. So just bear that in mind. So I'll be going live for a little while longer, answering your questions and engaging in this discussion. Anderson or Rodon, play 1. Anderson. Bruno triple captain for me. Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of triple captaining a United player, but it is a good fixture for them this week. I'm still of the opinion that Haaland against West Ham is the best triple captaincy opportunity remaining in the first half of the season. Yes, it is deadline. I think Palmer will start, so that could be a decent shout. I used every single booster this season, and the triple captain was the most successful. I utilised it back in Gameweek 6 when Haaland scored a brace against Burnley, and he also got an assist. Yeah, exactly. Lock up and prepare for the midweek chaos. That's a good way of summing it up. Good to see you, JFT Gunner. And yes, indeed, everything is done. H Army says, I did Senesi to Timber and still started Thiago despite this, as he gets a lot of pens lately and my bench options suck. Yeah, I think Thiago is a great option still, but for this week, I think the timing's a bit awkward. I will get him in on the wild card, but I wanted to go for something a little bit different with this, well, the 2 free transfers, right? And also having the wild card in my back pocket. My defense is a mess. Nico Williams, Borja, Munoz. Yeah, Munoz is probably the best defender in the game alongside Timber. The problem is there is that suspension risk, and then you could be in a lot of trouble, at least for a week. I grew a pair and went for Fernandes captain. Yeah, but let's see if growing a pair actually works in this situation or if it costs you points. But we can talk all about this in my upcoming videos and live streams. Oscar says my goalies and defenses for Bruggen, Dubravka, Gay, Lacroix, Ruben, Chalobah, and Timber. What should I do after this deadline with 1 free transfer? Should I sell anyone or keep them? You've got a decent sort of setup, but I would be tempted to buy a Newcastle option like Chow. So you've got 2 Palace defenders. Maybe selling one of them could be the way to go. So maybe Lacroix, who is probably better for DEFCON than Gay, but in terms of overall FPL points and also Gay's attacking potential, that is something you might want to weigh up as well. But you do have a lot of money invested in your defensive line, so you could even consider downgrading one of these options. And I think the Palace defender would probably be the one. So Lacroix to a cheaper choice like Van Heck or Mukiele, etc. And that could be used for your midfield and forward moves, which are even more important. Guys, subscribe to the channel and like the stream too. Thank you very much. Oh, gods of YouTube, please let me get the membership. Well, good luck to you, Zero, and let's see if YouTube are listening. But I will be gifting them now, and also ending this poll. So Haaland did win it. Only just, though, over Fernandes. I think if I put in Bumo instead, it would have been a different story. Thank you, Stanis. Great man, becoming a big fan. I appreciate it, and the same goes for everybody else who's been watching, liking, sharing, subscribing, and all that good stuff. And the discussion doesn't stop here. There is my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, and there are many ways to reach out to me, but those are the best ways of doing so. And the comment section of my videos, community posts, you're going to get a lot with my channel and all the different social media platforms. But let's gift the first batch of 5 memberships, and let's see who gets them. Okay, so just going to the live chat now again, and I will go through FPL Challenge fairly soon. Locked in and good luck Dylan decided to sell Sarr to Anderson. Feel it is going to be a low game week score. Hoping West Ham shut down United because I don't own any United players. Yeah, West Ham are bottom of the clean sheet odds, and despite United's inconsistencies, you'd still back them to score a few against West Ham, maybe 2 or 3, but yeah, Fernandes and Mbumo look appealing this week. Then again, the last home game ended in tears, you could say, against Everton. Captain Salah, here we go. All the best, John. Brought in Gakpo for Kudus, taking a punt and prepping for my free hit in 16. Not too shabby, and I would consider Gakpo an upgrade on Kudus. Zero says, rate my team. Yeah, fairly solid. I like most of it. I'd say an 8 out of 10, maybe even a little bit higher, but yeah, there's always, you know, a few things that could come back to bite you, like Richards this week. I think if Palace were to rotate any of their centre-backs, Richards is the most likely, but overall, you've got a solid setup. Yeah, FIFA World Cup draw this Friday. I'm not sure who I want Argentina to draw with. There are also some games that haven't been finalised yet, so, you know, we don't even know if Italy will qualify, even though you'd back them to. Norway's the team you don't want in pot free, to draw in from pot free. Yeah, Norway could be a dark horse for this tournament. I mean, we always have that sort of team we have in mind. Sometimes it goes horribly wrong when it comes to those predictions, but I think Norway will do fairly well. Alfred with his team, 2 transfers, 1.6 in the bank for next game week. Can you suggest a couple of moves? So I think defensively you're pretty well set, even though I'm not a massive fan of Goodmanson. You could always consider selling him to Van Heck as one example. Apart from that, I'm looking at Ndai as the only other sort of like massive upgrade you could make. So maybe Ndai making way for Bruno Guimaraes, Enzo Fernandez, Minter. That's probably what I'd be looking at. But you've also got enough money there to go from Ndai to Foden, which is something you might want to consider. Yeah, Bruno is predicted to rise today. Should I buy him tonight or I'm priced out? Well, there is a quick turnaround between deadlines, but United play on Thursday. Other things can happen today and tomorrow, and you might have other files to put out. So always make early transfers with caution. So always be very wary of the potential repercussions. But I do like Fernandes long term. He's a decent acquisition. Ian Mayner says, just went with Bruno Fernandes as my captain. Let the show begin and good luck to everyone. Just hope this Game Week 14 won't be a disappointing one. Yeah, that's all we can hope for. And likewise, enjoy it. So for the 5 memberships that I gifted, they have been given to Edger, Contrarian 322, James Carr, Paulo Block City FC, and Theodoros. So enjoy it. There is still room for 5 more though, since we hit our super chat goal, and yeah, also with all the great work by Paredes earlier. Well, I guess the YouTube gods didn't listen. Well, you've still got a chance, but I don't want to get your hopes up because yeah, YouTube is doing YouTube things. Oscar says my midfield and strikers are already good. I have Bruno Guimaraes, Minter, Fernandes, Semenyo, Rice, Haaland, Thiago Mateta. Yeah, that is a fairly good attacking line to be fair. No real need to make changes, but I just look at your defensive line and I still think long term you could argue it is a lot of money invested in that position, but I'd still probably highlight the same move or the same player to sell, but instead of buying a cheaper defender, you might want to opt for someone similarly priced, let's say. So looking back at what you said, I mean, there are a lot of messages in here. I can't even see where you put the last one. Yeah, here. So you got Verbruggen already, so I don't think Van Heck is really worth it. Van Dijk could be a decent solution for you if you've got enough money. But it's not something that I see as a massive upgrade. What are your thoughts about Gameweek 16 Wildcard? Yeah, I mean, that is also a way of using up your free transfers, then you wildcard, and then you keep 5 free transfers because of the AFCON moves that we are allocated in that game week. So that looks like a fairly decent shout, but it also is team dependent, and for others, they might not be able to get to that stage or optimize every single game week in that sort of manner. But yeah, I think in my situation, I'll reassess this over the coming days, but a Game Week 16-17 wildcard is looking more likely for me now. I hear African players can play until Game Week 16. Will it affect your wildcard strategy? Not necessarily, but it does influence how I will use my 5 free transfers, right? And you don't need to be in a rush to sell all your African players straight away, unless you've got so many and that you need to deal with all of them to have a full starting 11. But that's not going to be the case for most FPL managers anyway. But yeah, it's definitely something to bear in mind. You need to have all of this, factored in when making your decisions and deciding when to wildcard. But yeah, I think Game Week 16-17 is when I'm going to finally deploy that chip. I captain Semenyo over Saka, Haaland, Gakpo. Nah, he's not going to get 0 this time. Surely not. Would like to see England win something in my lifetime, says Twisted Parky, other than, what's that? El Torno? Or an Asian or African team winning. Europe and America's had lots of fun. Yeah, but even with the Americas, right? Brazil won in 2002, and it took 20 more years for Argentina to win it. So, yeah, I get what you're saying. Europe has definitely had a lot of fun. I mean, all of these different countries are winning it, but yeah, hopefully not the next one. Hopefully Argentina again, but yeah, it's going to be a very challenging World Cup, that's for sure. Know your recommendation for Sanchez, still Wando Verbruggen. And also Verbruggen works quite well with Kelleher, but I'd be more keen on like that sort of Brighton, also Brentford rotation in the defensive line with like Van Heck and also Van den Berg. But yeah, Verbruggen would also enter the equation. I just think Sanchez is worth the extra 0.4 million. Ian Mayner says, just did a triple Arsenal, Eze, Timber and Marino. Just hope this won't come back to bite me later because I don't have Thiago. Holy clouds. Well, welcome to the club. I don't have Thiago either. I did bring him in on the free hit, thankfully, last week. But yeah, against Arsenal, I'm quite happy to look elsewhere. When will you sell Ndai and Reinildo? Well, very soon. I'm not really in a rush, right? I mean, I've also got Reinders who needs to be sold, but that's where the wildcard could come in. And I've got 5 free transfers. But yeah, I'm still fairly confident and happy with how my team looks at the moment. Free at 15, wildcard 18, and bench boost 19 is what I'm looking at. Solid platform, and typically you like to wildcard just before bench boosting, so that makes sense. Will AFCON 5 transfers return in fixtures in the future for 2027? It's too early to say. We haven't even seen how it pans out yet, and then based on the feedback, we will see if this is integrated, but I don't think so. Not for next season anyway, because there is no mid-season tournament like AFCON. Team news in 5? Yeah, possibly. I mean, now it's 3 minutes. No, reaction stream today, probably not. I mean, because that would be very late. The games are going to end at like 10 p.m. or something. If there is a reaction stream, maybe tomorrow. But I also want to put out content. Yeah, there's pretty much a lot to go through, but I'll try to do a reaction stream and let you know about it. It's more likely you'll get one over the weekend. That's for sure. But yeah, I think for midweek, if there is one, probably tomorrow, if not Thursday. Zero says, right, YouTube gods, listen up. If I win the membership, I will like your 2016 YouTube Rewind. Well, we'll wait and see. The giant Norwegian who will haul tonight is playing for Atletico Madrid, sadly. That's not what I want to hear. Even though, if City lose, I'll sign up for that, even if it means Haaland blanks. Best and Nessie replacements, got O'Reilly and Free Palace already. Well, Timber and Van Dijk would be the standouts, but I'd also be considering Chow, actually. I will never ever forget Verbruggen trolls. No way he's going to enter my squad again. He is very frustrating. Yeah. AFCON will always be in December or January. Prepare for AFCON transfer return. Yeah, I mean, until the next African Cup of Nations tournament, it could happen, but I don't think it will happen for January 2027 in a year's time. I was right. Haaland went easy versus boyhood team. I was too scared to go Thiago, though. Haaland looked pissed end of the game. Any idea why? No, I couldn't really tell you. Maybe because he didn't score. But City left it late. They still got the win, but they looked a bit shaky in the second half. Is it worth to free hit in 15 or 16? Very team-dependent question, mate. Very team-dependent. But looking at it, I'd be leaning more towards Gameweek 15. Your support team when it comes to the World Cup, Argentina. Own Watkins since Gameweek 1, 13 games and 1 goal, switched him out for Voltemada, watch him start scoring points. Yep, and he should start after getting a rest over the weekend. He also didn't start in the Europa League fairly recently. Lol, yeah, if I get a Bruno hat-trick, I will watch all your videos again. That's quite a task, mate. I mean, that's 1,300 videos or so. But good luck. That's all I can really say. Okay, so there are 5 more memberships to give out. I'm going to do that now as a sort of thank you to those that have stuck around. And let's see who gets it. Drop a like on your way out, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and also check the links in the description. There's my Patreon, the Championships Discord server, FPL League, Spotify, FPL Challenge as well. So, yeah, to Alex, also Minpun, Thomas, Sam McGreevy, and Bonnie, enjoy that membership for an entire month. 00 says, I initially did captain Bruno Fernandes, but then I realized I didn't have the balls to do so. Yeah, well, I'd rather have FPL points. Actually, should I say that? No, I'm not even going to finish that sentence. So, yeah. Took a -4 hit to get Foden and Timber for Sa and Gabriel. Yeah, looks pretty solid. Even if the worst comes to worst and 1 or 2 of these players are rotated this week, which hopefully doesn't happen, I think long-term they're great acquisitions, particularly Timber. Yeah, lineups are out. I'll go through that very soon. Ah, yes, the YouTube gods love me. Yeah, that is sarcasm, isn't it? So fair, thank you very much. AFCON trying to do tournament in the middle of the year in June in 2019, but it backfired terribly. Yeah, I get it. Look, it's difficult, right, with so many competitions and everything that goes on. But yeah, they need to find a way because it is a big disruption to the season, and then there's this sort of push-pull between clubs and countries. But let's go through the lineups. There is probably a lot to go through with at least 2 of these games. We do have Tottenham-Newcastle at 8:15 PM in the UK, but we do have Bournemouth-Everton and Fulham-City. So I'm going to go through Bournemouth first, build some anticipation for Man City, even though some of you will be typing as I speak in terms of their lineup. So let's bring them in. And I can see how I did with my predicted lineups so far. So let's bring up Fulham. And last but not least, Man City. Okay, already a few surprises that I just saw. I'll be going for that soon. And that's for Fulham, by the way. I haven't even seen City's yet, but I will do in a second. Okay. Let's bring up Bournemouth. And after, I'll conclude with FPL Challenge. So Petrovic, Truffer, Scott, Adams, Diakite, Cliver, Jimenez, Adley, Krupi Jr., Semenyo, and Milicevic. So I got 10 out of 11 right for Bournemouth, and Cliver was the one that caught me out a little bit. But yeah, I was considering Cliver, but in the end I didn't opt for him. But still pretty good. If we look at Everton, though, Pickford, Garner, Tarkovsky, O'Brien, Mikolenko, Alcaraz, Eric Bonham, Ndai, Dewsbury Hall, Grealish, and Barry. So I think 9 out of 11 correct for Everton. But yeah, that is what they've gone for. And let's now have a look at Fulham. But of course, all the eyes will be on Man City. So Leno, Tete, Anderson, Bassi, Sessegnon, Berg, Lukic, Smith Rowe, Wilson, Raul Jimenez, and Iwobi. So yeah, I think the surprise here is Smith Rowe starting, but Wilson does get the nod despite being an injury doubt and going into game week 14. And last but not least is Man City. Donnarumma, Mateus Nunes, Diaz, Gavardio, O'Reilly, Nico Gonzalez, Bernardo Silva, Reinders, Foden, Doku, and Haaland. I thought they'd rotate a little bit more. Maybe they'll save that for their next game, if not for match day 6 in the Champions League, but I don't think so because they still have quite a lot to play for in that competition. But I've got 3 City players. I've got Reinders on the bench. watch him score now. I mean, whatever, it is what it is. But Foden and Haaland, those are the two difference makers, especially with the captaincy on the Norwegian robot. And for FPL Challenge here, I've got Raya, Munoz, Mbumo, Enzo, Salah, and Haaland. If I remember to actually change this team, you know, after seeing all these lineups, I will modify a few things throughout the week, but I will go for this sort of platform, maybe add another value creator at 7 million or below. But it has been a blast talking to you for the past couple of hours. We did hit our goal of 150 likes and made even more progress towards 38k on YouTube. If you haven't done so already, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit that notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy. And yeah, thank you very much to those that supported, and big up to Paredes for the 10 memberships. I gifted 10 more as well, so we've got a lot of new members on board, and there's a lot to look forward to for UCL Fantasy and FPL over the coming weeks. You'll get early access to my videos, proud to comments, amongst many other perks, and everyone else can sign up using the link in the description below, patreon.com/FPLDylan, or click the join button on YouTube. And yeah, there's also many different ways to interact with me and the content, and it's always a great, you know, aspect of making these videos and live streams. So a big up to the community, and I'll answer a few more before making way. So good luck as well, Safair. Yeah, I mean, in Africa, also South America, we can see 40, 45 degrees during the summer. Thank you, Agustin. Igualmente. ELT Singapore says, I started Lacroix, Van Dijk, Cucurella, Semenyo, Saka, Doku, Enzo, Haaland, Mateta, and Voltemada. Is benching O'Reilly correct, or I could have benched any others? I think so. I do back Cucurella and Lacroix to start, but there are always concerns with Chelsea, and I think this week with Crystal Palace as well. I wouldn't have benched one of your attacking players for O'Reilly necessarily, so I do agree with your final, you know, decision-making there. Hey, Charmy says, don't even want to look at the C lineup as I have a triple up. Yeah, so do I, but they all start, and I've benched Rangers, so it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. Bournemouth 2, Everton 2, Fulham 0, City 2, Newcastle 2, Spurs 0, Arsenal 2, Brentford 0, Brighton 2, Villa 2, Burnley 0, Palace 1, Wolves 0, Forest 1, Leeds 1, Chelsea 2, Liverpool 2, Sunderland 2, and United 2, West Ham 0. These are Twisted Parky's predictions. Very interesting as always, and I appreciate you saying them in. I had Keane. He isn't starting? Oh, yeah. I forgot to actually highlight that. Yeah, so O'Brien and Tarkowski are playing in central defence, and it's Garner at right back. So yeah, they have made a few changes here. So I think Keane must be injured. Yeah, he's not even on the bench. So yeah, I went through all of them. That's worth highlighting. Apologies there to Keane owners, but this can happen. Yes, Cherky benched again. He's kind of being used as this super sub who can get goals and assists. You know, he's got a very good goals to minutes ratio, and he always finds a way to be involved. Surprised Pep did not start Marmoush or Cherky, but most likely I feel they start on the weekend because we play Madrid next week. Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably the plan here. But Fulham away is a tough fixture, so it makes sense to go strong. But I think Cherky for Rangers would have been the preference, if possible. No worries, Dylan. Rangers still in his episode 1, season 1 performance. Yeah, but there is a time to go on to episode 2 at least. Cherky owners, my heart breaks for you. 2 benchings in a row. There aren't many, but they do exist. Thank you, Mina. Good luck to you, buddy. Likewise. Thank you very much. What time is the next deadline? Sort of normal. So 11 AM in the UK on Saturday. Just going to double check and confirm that for you, but I'm fairly sure that is the case. And yes. Wait, yeah, I'm looking at this deadline. Yeah, Saturday the 6th of December, 11 AM in the UK. Take care, Dylan. Catch up with you during the deadline stream on Saturday. That's the plan. Thank you very much. Krupi Hall on the bench. Yeah, I mean, I backed him to start over Evanilson. One of the few things I got right. I mean, I say one of the few. I got quite a few things right, but yeah, for Bournemouth, that was a decent prediction. But I think Evanilson will get the nod in the coming games. We'll add Krupi as my first sub. We'll see. Maybe he just ends up blanking. I mean, that's what you're going to hope for. Thank you, Ian. Have a blessed week, Dylan, and a wonderful Gameweek 14. See you on the next deadline. Likewise, thank you very much, and enjoy the week of football. I can smell Fulham upset. Thiago penalty goal, Sunderland high press leading to Liverpool defensive mistakes. Wow, a lot of bold predictions in there, you could say, but maybe not so much the last one. Are Wolves going to break, or could they break Derby County's lowest points ever? We said that about Southampton last season. They ended up not, being the worst team ever in the Premier League, but who knows? I mean, Wolves need to get some results ASAP, and Nottingham Forest is an opportunity this week. Tony says, rate my team. Yes, it is good. That's for sure, but I think rotation can burn a lot of us this week. We just have to hope it's not the case. Cherky is benched, so that is a bit of a disappointment there, but yeah, you just have to hope that he either doesn't play any minutes, or if he does get a cameo, he makes an impact as he usually does. He's got a very good goals and assists per minutes ratio. And yeah, Twister Park, yeah, I agree. Don't jinx it. That is definitely what we kind of hope for. But thank you, everyone. I'll see you very soon. The next stream will likely be on Saturday, but there is the possibility for a reaction. And if it's not tomorrow or on Thursday, then there should be one over the weekend. There's also UCL Fantasy content for Match Day 6, which I'll be preparing over the coming days, and even more Game Week 15 videos now for Fantasy Premier League, transfer tips, wildcard squad, team selection, you name it. So there's a lot to look... Sorry, I can't even speak. There's a lot to look forward to in this Christmas period, and December is going to be very hectic when it comes to the schedule. But I appreciate all your support. Take care. Enjoy the football. I'll see you on Saturday, and hopefully we get green arrows to keep on growing.